Chapter 637. Xia Tian looked at her and asked, since Ji Mingran was ready to give you a blow, she must have done it slowly. She suddenly became the first one. Did she make a mistake in her plan because she was too anxious, or did someone push her up? Who else could it be? In this vast Haicheng, only Mo Jingshin had the ability to control the media and suddenly push Ji Mengran's popularity up in such a short period of time. In fact, Xia Tian had guessed it, but she deliberately asked Jin Wan. Wan, I think Mo Jingshin actually wants to help you, but you keep turning off your phone and don't contact anyone. Xia Tian looked at her. This matter is also related to your marriage. Most of the curses are from those women who are jealous of you. It's a fact that you were married to him. Now, if he comes to help you, you'll get twice the result with half the effort. You've been very stubborn since you came back from England. I know you were really hurt when you left 3 years ago, but if you can still be with Mo Jingshin, you should control your temper. I think he still favors you, and you don't like any other man except him, do you? Jin Wan didn't speak, just holding the cup and looking down at the two most popular topics on her phone. Xia Tian came over again, took her cell phone away, and didn't let her look at it again. When Jin Wan had nowhere to look and looked back at her, Xia Tian raised her eyebrows and looked at her. I'll cover you in a while. Dress up. Your car is too eye-catching now, and you can't take a taxi. Drive my car and go to Mo Jingshin. When did I say I was going to find him? In this situation, what can he do even if he comes to help? Jin Wan's expression was very indifferent. After returning from G City, Jin Wan had been busy in the company. She hadn't contacted Mo Jingshin these days, probably because she was busy to keep a distance from him. But after returning from Jing City, Jin Wan's mood had changed. After returning from G City, she couldn't tell what was on her mind now. Mo Jingshin didn't know what to say. No matter what the result will be, I believe in Mo Jingshin. Xia Tian persuaded her patiently. You still don't ask him for help at this time. Do you really plan to go out in this way in the future? What's more, it's not just your own reputation that's at stake right now, but also MN Group. You have thousands of employees in your company, and the company's stock has fallen a lot in the past 2 days. If this continues, have you thought about the consequences? Yes, but that doesn't mean there's no other way. Xia Tian rolled her eyes at her in exasperation. You clearly know that no matter what the best method is, with Mo Jingshin's help, it will yield twice the result with half the effort, but you just have to avoid this most important person. Jin Wan did not speak. It's your business that you have a personality, but you're not alone now. You're the president of MN Group and the person in charge. You have the responsibility and the need to deal with this matter as soon as possible instead of dragging it on like this. There's the shortest way, but you insist on taking a detour. Xia Tian said as she grabbed Jin Wan's arm and dragged her all the way back to the bedroom. What for? I'm going to disguise you. At least dress up so that no one will recognize you when you go out. With that, Xia Tian opened Jin Wan's wardrobe, took out a black hooded sweater, and threw it to her. Then she found a pair of jeans and threw them to her. Finally, she rummaged around and took out a pair of oversized sunglasses for her. Jin Wan, it's so dark now, and you want me to wear sunglasses? Are you afraid that no one can see that I'm sneaking out? Xia Tian. She suddenly took the sunglasses from Jin Wan's hand and turned to take out a stack of medical masks from her bag. I caught a cold half a month ago. I was afraid that I would infect the child, so I went to the pharmacy to buy these masks. They are all new and unused. Put them on later and pretend that you have a cold, so that no one will suspect you. Jin Wan. In the end, Xia Tian saw that Jin Wan was fully dressed and had put on the hood behind the sweater. The hood was big enough to cover the space on both sides of her face. If she walked with her head down in the mask, even if the media had X-ray vision, they might not be able to recognize her. Xia Tian was satisfied and handed her car keys to Jin Wan. Jin Wan looked at the car keys in her hand and then at her fully dressed appearance. And for some reason, she had a feeling that she was being forced to do something. It was already past 11 o'clock in the evening. Jin Wan was not sure where Mo Jingshin was, and Xia Tian wouldn't let her stay at home in Yuehubei. Having nowhere to go, she could only drive around High City. But as she drove, she finally drove to the square opposite the Shine Group. She turned her eyes to the office area on the top floor and saw that the lights of the CEO's office were on. Jin-won stopped the car. Just as she got out of the car, she happened to see Shin-moo coming out of the company. It was so late, but Shin-moo was still here. As soon as Shin-moo came out, he saw Jin-won. Although Jin-won had covered herself up, there was no one in the square opposite the company in the middle of the night. There were only cars passing by quickly on the road, but Jin-won was standing by the car. If Shin-moo hadn't had a strong heart, he would have been startled by her. After staring at Jin-won for a long time, Shin-moo walked over. Seeing Jin-won fully dressed and her eyes exposed through the mask, he held back his laughter and asked, "Miss G?" Jin-won felt a little embarrassed just now, but being recognized, she had to turn around and look at him. "Why are you still in the company so late?" "I was just about to go home, but CEO Mo should stay in the company tonight. He is still in the office. Are you going to go up to see him?" Shin-moo asked. Jin-won was silent for a moment and said, "I'm just passing by." Shin-moo nodded solemnly. "Yes, passing by." "Then, Miss G, who passed by our company at 11 o'clock in the middle of the night. If you are sure you don't want to go into CCO, Mo, I'm leaving. There are security guards in the company at night. If you go in like this, you will probably be stopped outside, and the security guards are likely to send you directly to the police station." Jin-won, "Are you sure you don't want to go into CCO, Mo?" Shin-moo asked with a smile. Jin-won, "Then I'm leaving," Shin-moo said, made a gesture of goodbye to her, and turned to leave. Shin-moo stopped and looked back at her. Seeing her embarrassed look, he couldn't help but smile. "All right, since you are here, why are you hesitating? I'll take you in." Chapter 638. After sending Jin-won to the top floor of the company, Shin-moo left. After all, it was already late, and Jin-won didn't want to bother him anymore. But standing outside the elevator on the top floor of Shine Group, in the bright and clean corridor, Jin-won stood for a long time, glancing in the direction of the light in the CEO's office. The next morning, Shin-moo arrived at the company before the others arrived. It was just 7 o'clock in the morning. When he arrived at the top floor, he didn't see Jin-won and was about to go to his assistant's office. However, when he passed by the CEO's office, he saw the door was open and the cleaning staff of the logistics department who got up earlier were cleaning the office. Mo Jingshin had just come out of the break room. It seemed that he was really busy in the company last night and didn't rest much. After taking a shower, he went out of the break room, but there seemed to be no trace of Jin-won. Shin-moo felt that something was wrong. If Jin-won came, CEO Mo shouldn't be like this. He thought for a while, knocked on the door, and walked in. CEO Mo Jingshin took a look at him and walked to the desk. He picked up the documents on the desk and was about to ask him to hand them over to the planning department when the other employees came to work. However, when he looked at him again, he saw Shin-moo's hesitant look and asked indifferently, "What's the matter? Did Miss G leave last night?" Mo Jingshin paused and looked at him again. "What? Miss G came to the company to see you yesterday. I specially sent her to the top floor and then left." "Didn't she enter the office?" Mo Jingshin put the documents in his hands on the desk and looked at Shin-moo, who was standing in front of the door with a puzzled look. "When?" "Last night, around 11 o'clock in the middle of the night. When I was about to go home, I saw her standing in the square opposite the company, standing in the car and hesitating, so I directly sent her in." Mo Jingshin glanced out of the office again, did not speak, and walked out. Shin-moo quickly backed away from the door. He saw Mo Jingshin walk out of the office, look around on both sides of the corridor, and then walk toward the escalator closest to the office. The moment he pushed open the escalator door, Mo Jingshin's gaze was fixed on the small black figure. Jin-won did come to the top floor last night, but considering that Mo Jingshin was still in the company and the lights in the office were on, she guessed that he was busy with something, so she didn't go in. She hesitated for a long time and finally didn't knock on his door. After all, this matter was really tricky for her. She had always thought that when dealing with people like Ji Min-gran, she would be fine as long as she didn't let her take advantage of her. But she didn't expect that her sister, who had the same mother but different father, would finally take advantage of her back and profile to give her such a blow. Ji Min-gran even seemed to have studied Jin-won's dressing style in the past 3 years. In those photos, Ji Mingran was wearing the same clothes as Jean Wan, or the style was the same, including her hairstyle. In this case, it was Ji Mingran's full blow and Jean Wan's unpreparedness. Perhaps she should have thought that as early as Ji Mingran said a few words about the inheritance of the Ji Corporation, she should have been prepared, and she wouldn't have been taken advantage of like this. Jean Wan didn't know how to talk to Mo Jingshan. After thinking for a long time, she finally went to the corridor closest to his office and sat on the stairs for several hours. Even now, when it was dawn, she still sat there without moving. The corridor was actually very dark, and there were automatic sensor lights on it. She sat here all night and didn't move, so the lights were naturally off. But before Jean Wan heard anything, she suddenly saw the light come on. She, who was sitting on the stairs with her arms around her knees, paused slightly and subconsciously turned her eyes, only to see the man in a white shirt and black trousers standing at the top of the stairs. He had one hand in his trouser pocket, and his eyes were clear and deep as he looked down at her. She froze. The man stood there, looking at her sitting on the stairs with her arms around her knees, and his indifferent tone was emotionless. "Have you been sitting here all night? How is the air in the corridor?" Jean Wan. She abruptly stood up, but because she had been sitting there for too long, her legs were numb. It was as if a sharp electric current was running through her legs and feet. Instantly, she was in so much pain that she leaned against the wall beside her to barely stand. Mo Jingshan was about to approach her when her body swayed. When he saw her leaning against the wall, he slowed down. He lowered his eyes to look at the black hoodie she was wearing and the large hat on her back. He could guess what she had dressed up to come here last night. There was a smile hidden in the man's eyes. It was not very obvious, at least from Jean Wan's point of view, and Mo Jingshan's expression was almost as indifferent as a bird's. "How did you know I was here?" Jean Wan waited until the pain in her legs and feet had subsided before she looked up at the man. Mo Jingshan glanced at her. "I don't have X-ray vision. Of course I couldn't know you had been sitting outside my office all night. Shenmue just came to work and found you were not here, so he asked me." Jean Wan pursed her lips. "I didn't disturb you, did I?" She clearly wanted to come over to ask for his help, but refused to get to the point. She seemed to be afraid that she would disturb him. Mo Jingshan looked at her silently for a moment and said indifferently, "You didn't enter the office. How could you disturb me?" Who was Mo Jingshan? She was afraid that from the moment he knew she was here, he had already known her purpose of coming here. Jean Wan stood against the wall for a while, thinking that since she had seen him, it seemed that there was no need to continue hiding. She slowly clenched her fists against the wall behind her, thought for a while, and finally spoke. "In fact, I've been considering whether to ask you to help me these days, but I don't want to implicate you. The insults on the internet have also affected you. I don't know if they have caused you any trouble." Jean Wan stood there and said softly, "Mo Jingshan, it's very difficult for me to get through this, isn't it? The comments on the internet are just moving their fingers. You're such a big-hearted person. Why would you care about what others say? But now I don't have any evidence to prove my innocence. Even if I want to explain, no one will believe me. But if things continue to develop like this, I'm afraid I can't even stay in High City." "Who said you need to explain?" Mo Jingshan chuckled. "Every incident has its own cause. There's no need to panic. Find the cause, and the problem will be easily solved." Jean Wan was startled. "What do you mean?" The man reached out to her, his voice gentle and patient. "Come here. Dash." Chapter 639. Seeing the man reach out to her, Jean Wan was silent for a moment, walked up the stairs, and hesitated before raising her hand to grab the man's cuff. She said, "Mo Jingshan, I'm here to ask you for help, not to flirt with you." The man gave a faint smile, held her hand in his palm, and pulled her into his arms. Jean Wan stumbled and couldn't stand steadily because she had been sitting like this all night, so she fell into his arms. Where her face bumped against his chest, she heard the man's voice, which seemed to be smiling, whispering in her ear, "Is there a difference?" If it weren't for love, she wouldn't have come to him for help. Jean Wan didn't speak. After all, she was here to ask for help and had no reason to be arrogant. However, the man just looked indifferent, as if he didn't care about her affairs. but now she strangely felt as if he had been waiting for a long time. The man took her out of the stairwell and didn't let go of her hand. He looked at the time. You've been sitting in the corridor for so long. Aren't you hungry? Let's go back to the office and have breakfast. Jinwan still didn't speak and was led into the office by the man. The cleaning staff had left, and Shinmu was sure that Mo Jingshin had found Jinwan after staying in the corridor for so long. So he went back to the assistant's office. There was no one else here. The bright, spacious, and modern office smelled faintly of fresh fragrance. The cleaning staff must have put some faintly fragrant fungicide on the floor. After Jinwan entered, he asked her to sit down, and she went to sit on the sofa. The man took a look at her, called someone to send breakfast over, and then called Shinmu to arrange a press conference at 10 o'clock in the morning. When Jinwan heard the words, press conference, she thought it was a press conference for a new project of his company. Anyway, if he had something to do, he could go ahead. It made no difference whether she stayed in Yuehu Bay or here. However, after breakfast, the man went to a meeting and asked her to go to his lounge to sleep for a while. Jinwan was indeed sleepy. After all, she had been sitting in the corridor for so long and hadn't slept all night. It wasn't like she hadn't been to this lounge before. After the man left, she got up and went to the lounge. She didn't know how long he would be busy with the meeting and the press conference. She sat on the edge of the bed and threw her bag and cell phone aside. In the past 3 days, the aggressive news and comments about her on the internet had almost changed her habit of looking at her cell phone before going to bed. She was too lazy to look at it, so she lay down and took a short nap. However, as soon as she closed her eyes, she accidentally fell asleep. An hour and a half later, it was already 9:30 a.m. There was still half an hour before the press conference. Mo Jingshen returned to his office. The person in charge of a department store in High City entered the office with him, holding a set of clothes specially selected for Jinwan and waiting respectfully in the office. When Mo Jingshen woke Jinwan up, she was still in a daze. After all, she had only slept for an hour. In a daze, she heard the man say, "Go wash up, change, and come to the press conference with me." She sobered up a little. Looking at the gentle and patient face of the man who bent over the bed to wake her up, it took her a long time to come back to herself. "What press conference? Do you want me to go with you?" Seeing that the little woman was still a little sluggish after being woken up, Mo Jingshin sighed and kissed her on the lips with a smile. With his kiss, Jinwan woke up completely. She jumped up from the bed and quickly went to wash up. When she went out, she saw the clothes sent by the mall staff. It was a very fitting French brand suit. In short, it looked more suitable for facing the media than the black sweater and jeans Jinwan was wearing. Jinwan didn't ask much, but she could guess that Mo Jingshin must have made arrangements for her. She didn't think much and cooperated with him to change. At 10 o'clock, Jinwan followed him to the so-called press conference, which was a very large multimedia hall on the 5th floor of Shine Group, where other project and product press conferences were held. When she walked him backstage, she saw that the guest seats outside had been filled up so quickly, and judging from the cameras and logos on the microphones in their hands, she was sure that all the major domestic media had arrived. Even the more senior and authoritative major media that never gossiped were present. There were many people here, but after all, this was Shine Group, so no one dared to speak loudly and waited patiently for the press conference to begin. Jinwan's incident had attracted so many media outlets in such a short time. It could be seen that Jinwan's incident was breaking news from many media outlets, but the other authoritative domestic media outlets had also arrived in such a short time, which was obviously because of Mo Jingshin's presence. Jinwan stood backstage and looked at the media. She found that she had been hiding from these people in Yuehu Bay for 2 days, but now standing here and seeing so many people, she didn't panic at all. Why? She turned to look at the man in a black suit beside her. "Although I admit that if you show up, you can help me regain some face, aren't you afraid of being cursed with me by holding a press conference to support me?" The man's indifferent gaze fell on her face. "Are you afraid?" "Of course not." The man chuckled. "Since you came to me, you should put all your trust in me." Of course, Jinwan trusted him, but this kind of thing was related to their former marriage. She just didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but she didn't expect that Mo Jingshin, who had always been low-key, would choose to hold such a grand press conference. Just as she was about to go on stage, Jinwon suddenly saw some people behind the media who had snuck in through their connections. For example, Ji Mingran was also in the crowd. She had followed a media friend in. Of course, Shine Group was not a place that could be easily snuck in unless someone deliberately turned a blind eye to it and let her in. Seeing that Ji Mingran had actually snuck in, Jinwon narrowed her eyes. Only then did she realize that perhaps Mo Jingshin did not just want to explain and support her. Otherwise, why would he allow Ji Mingran to sneak into the scene? Chapter 640. Jinwon was wearing a black business-style suit inside and a knee-length cream-white coat outside. Her hair, which was much longer than before, was tucked into a hair tie of the same color, and she was wearing a pair of high-heeled boots. Just like her usual image in the company and in front of the media, she was exquisite, bright, and had an extraordinary temperament. It was as if she had not been defeated by the scandals of the past few days. Instead, the light in the bottom of her eyes was clear. When she walked out from the back and faced the media, she was also calm and fearless. But Mo Jingshin didn't let her speak, so she just walked out and sat down on the stage with a calm smile on her face. CEO Mo, you rarely attend press conferences in person. Many of your company's important new projects press conferences are usually attended by the vice president or other people in charge of the company. It can be said that you rarely appear in public like this in front of the media. Is it because of the reputation of your ex-wife, Miss G, or for other reasons that you suddenly hold a press conference in person this time? CEO Mo, are you going to say something on behalf of Miss G? Both of you appear at the same time. Can it prove that CEO G of MN Group was indeed married to you? The news of the marriage between the G and Mo families in High City many years ago has been dug out, but we haven't seen your photo. I wonder if CEO Mo has anything to say. I wonder what President Mo's opinion is on Miss G's frequent flirting with her business partners in recent years, and her conduct is improper. She has even been involved in a sex trade. CEO Mo, is it because Miss G is really desperate that she has to ask you to explain for her? As soon as Mo Jingshin appeared, the reporters had begun to ask questions. However, the man just coldly looked at the media at the press conference and listened to their questions. These reporters had restrained themselves. At least, although their questions were tricky, they were not as tricky as they were in other places. At least, they were still afraid of Shine Group and Mo Jingshin, but they still had to ask some key questions in such a big news. After some related questions were asked, Mo Jingshin took the microphone from the reporters. There are only two parts of today's press conference. The first part is to look at the photos and say something. Why don't you sit quietly and wait? After looking at the photos and videos, we'll start the interview. Hearing this, the reporters quickly returned to their seats. When the audience fell silent, Jinwon suddenly felt there was a light behind her. Only then did she notice that the black screen behind her had a projector function, and it was a very high-definition 300-inch screen. She looked back and saw the black screen lit up. The first photo that appeared was the ambiguous and unsightly photo of Jinwon sitting on a partner's lap and feeding him a drink, mouth to mouth, that had been widely spread in the media. As soon as this photo was released, there was some boos in the hall, but Jinwon was sitting at the bottom of the screen and looking at the photo. Although she didn't know what Mo Jingshin had prepared, she could at least regard herself as a bystander and didn't feel too nervous or ashamed. After all, the person in the photo was not her at all. However, the photos were played in the form of a slide. After the first photo stayed in the audience's eyes for about 5 seconds, it was changed to another photo. This photo was the same scene and the same person as the first one, but the angle was different. Obviously, the other photos were taken continuously due to the movements of the characters. In this photo, Jinwon was no longer a back view, but a side face which still looked very similar to Jinwon. In the third photo, the angle was changed again because Jinwon had unintentionally turned her face and seemed to be smiling, but this time, at least 1/3 of her face could be seen. The latter two photos were not in the photos exposed by the media. The reporters present didn't understand the significance of these photos, but then it was time for them to slap their faces. Hundreds of photos from all angles, back, profile, front, high definition, and some blurry because they were taken in a hurry, were projected one by one. Many of the photos that could be seen from the front surprised the reporters, because from the front, Jinwon was not the same person at all, but her profile and back were very similar. Even Jinwon didn't expect that Mo Jingshin could find out who took these photos and find the source of the original photos. At first, she thought these were Ji Mingran's photos, but at this moment, she realized that Ji Mingran must have hired some familiar reporters and paid them to secretly take photos from a distance. Only in this way could Jinwon be found out by accident. It turned out that this was the source of what Mo Jingshan said. Jinwon didn't speak, but continued to look at Ji Mingran's face on the big screen that gradually became clear. At the same time, she turned her eyes to look at Ji Mingran, who was hiding behind the crowd and whose face was getting paler and paler under her sunglasses. Almost more than 100 photos, all of which were not released in front of the media and were exposed by the media, were included. Those who knew about photography could naturally see what was going on in these photos. These were the original photos without any image processing. These photos were broadcast live on TV, which was enough to prove that Jinwon was really wronged. The woman whose back and profile were very similar to Jinwon was not her at all. If one didn't look at them with a dirty and ambiguous gaze, those photos with Jinwon's face were just normal social behaviors in British social circles, and there was nothing out of line. And they didn't expect that after the photos, there would be several videos. In the videos, the woman deliberately stuck close to the bodies and legs of the partners in various places, and from time to time rubbed her buttocks against the partners' lower bodies. At the same time, the woman in the video turned her head to ask the cameraman, "Are you done? It must be the effect I want, or it'll be a waste of effort." For a moment, the audience was in an uproar. Although not many people knew Ji Mingran's name, she was the second daughter of the Ji family, and there would always be some reporters who knew her and those who had interviewed her studio. Chapter 641. No wonder Ji Mingran's studio signed a new project and inherited the Ji Corporation were the hot topics yesterday afternoon and evening. It turns out that she deliberately framed Jinwon. It turns out that her sister came out to frame her. What a treacherous person. The video on the giant screen continued to play. Ji Mingran's smiling face suddenly froze on the screen. At the same time, the reporters on the stage kept taking pictures of the man and woman sitting calmly on the stage. The traffic of the various news media, which was already about to explode, suddenly surged in. In this half an hour, the popularity of the video suddenly skyrocketed and didn't go down. These are all photos. Even the date, time, and file size of the photos are displayed next to the photos. You can tell at a glance that they are the originals. The photos that were exposed a few days ago have obviously been manipulated. Otherwise, even if Ji Mingran deliberately imitated Jinwon's clothes and makeup, it can't be so similar. Those photos are fake, and these are the real ones. The faces of the reporters were all filled with anger. They had originally come to join in the fun of this ugly show of a wealthy family and wanted to find some explosive news to take credit for. However, the media had human nature after all. Faced with such a truth, all of them looked extremely resentful. However, when the audience had known the truth and the audience was full of curses against Ji Mingran, Mo Jingshin remained calm and sat there without a ripple. After seeing those photos, Jinwon also calmly smiled. Was this enough to prove that before she came to him, Mo Jingshin had long been looking for the person who took the photos? Ji Mingran had hidden so well that it was not easy to find her. But he found these photos in 2 days and quickly held a press conference for her. With Mo Jingshin's influence and Jinwon's current popularity, now these photos were the truth. They didn't need to say a word. People who were not stupid would know the whole story. Also, yesterday, the various topics about Ji Mingran became the first and second place, attracting a lot of people's attention. Now, with these photos and Ji Mingran's topic, many things were self-evident. Mo Jingshin and Jinwon remained calm in front of the media, but behind the crowd, when Ji Mingran heard their curses, Her expression changed from rigid to one of fear. She slowly stepped back, trying to leave this place. However, just as Ji Mingran was about to run out, two security guards who had been waiting outside the door for a long time blocked her way. They looked at her coldly, not giving her a chance to leave. You? Ji Mingran glared at them angrily. Move. The entire press conference had progressed to the point Mo Jingshan expected, and the man coldly said, I wonder if everyone is satisfied with the first segment of looking at pictures and talking. The media couldn't help but sigh. I didn't expect to make such a big mistake. I've really wronged CEO G. But after the truth is revealed, what is CEO Mo's so-called second step? Mo Jingshan coldly curved his lips. His gaze passed through the crowd and landed on Ji Mingran, who was blocked by the door of the multimedia hall by the security guards. For the second segment, the person in question, the second Miss G, should naturally be the one to explain to everyone. This self-directed show, where exactly did she learn this idea from, and what is her motive? As soon as Mo Jingshan finished speaking, all the media present looked back at the door. When they saw the woman who was dressed in low-key clothes, they immediately understood what was going on, got up, and rushed over with the cameras. Ji Mingran didn't expect that today. She just came here to see Jinwan make a fool of herself. After all, Jinwan couldn't explain the whole thing, even if Mo Jingshan showed up, but she didn't expect that the original photos would be found, nor did she expect that Mo Jingshan had set up this trap and waited for her to jump into it. The media immediately rushed over. She didn't need the security guards to stop them. In an instant, she was surrounded and had no way out. What are you doing? Ji Mingran pressed the oversized sunglasses on her glasses hard and lowered her head to cover her face, refusing to be photographed by the cameras. However, the photos on the screen were all of her face, and it made no difference whether she covered her face or not. Ji Mingran, how could you come here? Do you really think you can completely ruin your sister's reputation? Fortunately, we saw so many original photos from different angles today. Otherwise, I'm afraid all the media and people on the internet would have been fooled by you. I can't believe sisters would use such cruel and shameless means to frame each other. Since you're here, why don't you tell me what you think? Just as the media surrounded Ji Mingran, Mo Jingshan glanced at them indifferently, and then his eyes fell on Ji Mingran. Second Miss G. His voice was low, as if entwined with an indescribable sarcastic smile. The influence of today's press conference is not small. So many authoritative media are here. It's more direct than finding someone to casually post more than 20 photos on the internet. Since you are here, why don't you finish the second part of the press conference? The man's smile seemed to be quenched with ice, drilling into people's bones and blood, making them feel cold. Ji Mingran covered the sunglasses on her face, her fingertips trembling. She tried to hold back her emotions, turned to look at the stage, gritted her teeth, and suddenly took off her sunglasses. Facing the media and the two people on the stage, she said angrily, "Even if I did it, so what? Jinwan is not my father's biological daughter. What right does she have to inherit the G Corporation's property? Even I, the biological daughter of the G family, am excluded because of her? My father told me clearly that I won't get a penny from the G family. Why? She is an illegitimate daughter who doesn't even know who her father is. Why? However, in the face of Ji Mingran's angry accusation, the media kept their cameras on her. Standing 100 meters away, Mo Jingshan looked at the woman who was panic-stricken but forced herself to calm down and said lightly, "Second Miss G, if I were you, I would directly admit to the media how my actions over the years have disappointed and dissatisfied your biological father. He would rather hand over the family business to his adopted daughter who is worth tens of billions than hand it over to you, his biological daughter, to be ruined." Ji Mingran's face turned paler and paler, and her pupils kept contracting, but the man smiled coldly. At least, even if you really ruin Jinwan's reputation in such a disgraceful way, the one who knows you and your sister best is still Chairman G, and the G Corporation's inheritance will still not be handed over to you. After all, your father knows you best. How bad are you to be abandoned by your biological father like this? Dash. Chapter 642. Jean Wan didn't speak. Since Ji Ming-gran was exposed and the media surrounded her, she seemed to have nothing to do with this show. Seeing the cameras kept pointing at her, Ji Ming-gran angrily raised her hand to push them away, but the reporters standing closest to her said coldly, "Miss Ji, these cameras are not cheap. If you break them, are you going to compensate us with brand new ones?" As the reporters spoke, they deliberately brought the microphone to Ji Ming-ran's mouth. "Don't glare at us like this. Since you framed your sister through the media, isn't it natural that you're surrounded by the media now?" The reporters were very good at pestering people. Now that the truth had been revealed, they wanted to take revenge on Ji Ming-gran. Jean Wan didn't speak, just looked in that direction, and her face was covered with a layer of cold sarcasm. The next second, Ji Ming-gran forcefully pushed away the microphones in front of her. She grabbed another microphone with an ugly expression and was about to smash the cameras. "It doesn't matter if it's broken. I can't even afford to pay for these cameras." However, rather than smashing the cameras, she wanted to destroy today's evidence. Just as Ji Ming-gran was about to smash the cameras, Jean Wan stood in front of her and said calmly, "If necessary, I can help you record again." Hearing Jean Wan's words, Ji Ming-gran froze. The originals of those photos were in Mo Jingshan's hands. Even if the cameras were smashed today, they could record again at any time. Ji Ming-ran's eyes were red with anger. She turned to see that Jean Wan was still sitting on the sofa on the stage, holding her chin with one hand and looking in this direction with a very indifferent look. "Since Miss Ji is very dissatisfied with today's press conference, why don't you record again? I'll give you one last chance to clarify yourself. Those photos that have been manipulated to confuse people and your real purpose, why don't you say it yourself?" Everyone could feel the bone-chilling coldness behind Mo Jingshan's indifferent tone. The situation in front of the multimedia hall was getting out of control. Because of Mo Jingshan's words, those people pressed closer to Ji Ming-gran, asking her to say her purpose and intention. What purpose could she have? Driven by Mo Jingshan, many things had become obvious reasons. At this moment, all the people who had watched the live broadcast of the press conference were cursing Ji Ming-gran on the internet. In Ji Ming-ran's face was the palest and most panicked expression Jean Wan had ever seen. It seemed that she had been extremely panicked and forced by these people. She wanted to get angry but dared not, and her shoulders were trembling uncontrollably. She clenched her hand hard, and the calmness on her face could hardly be maintained. A person who should not be surnamed Ji is about to take away our Ji's property. I'm not reconciled, so I try to do something to fight for my own interests. Now that things have come to this, I have nothing to say. Ji Ming-gran didn't care about anything else. She lowered her head and was about to rush out of the crowd when she finally managed to push a few people away. Just as she was about to run out of the multimedia hall, she suddenly saw Ji Hongwen standing outside the door, just behind the crowd. The moment Ji Ming-gran rushed out, she froze in her tracks. She was surprised to see Ji Hongwen here. Ji Ming-gran couldn't care less. She lowered her head and was about to rush out of the crowd. However, when she was about to run out of the multimedia hall, she suddenly saw Ji Hongwen standing outside the door. The moment Ji Ming-gran rushed out, she froze and looked at Ji Hongwen, who was here. "Ming-gran, you complained publicly in front of the media that you couldn't get a penny from the Ji Corporation. You're really my good daughter." Ji Hongwen's face darkened, and he said coldly and angrily, "I don't intend to give the Ji Corporation to you. Don't you know the reason? Jean Wan has her own MN group. Even if I give her everything in the Ji family, it will still belong to the Ji family. She will protect everything that belongs to the Ji family. And you? Once I give the Ji Corporation to you, with your stupid brain, I'm afraid it will be swallowed up by the Sheng Corporation overnight." Ji Ming-ran's eyes were red. She had lost face after exposing the truth in front of the media, but she didn't expect that Mo Jingshan could so quickly and ruthlessly invite Ji Hongwen here. Was he going to help Jean Wan turn the situation around and kick her into hell? "Is this Director Ji?" "Sure enough, it's Director Ji. Director Ji, since you're here, why don't you tell us what's going on between your two daughters?" Some of the media had approached Ji Hongwon, but Ji Hongwon wouldn't speak for her at all. He had always been on Jin Wan's side, the one who was not his biological daughter. Ji Mingran's expression stiffened and her pupils dilated as she stared in Ji Hongwon's direction. Then, the light in her eyes started to crack bit by bit. Even though her facial expression didn't change, it was clear that she was on the verge of breaking down. Because Ji Hongwon was here, Jin Wan got up and walked toward the door. After all, Ji Mingran was surrounded by the media, but Ji Hongwon was the chairman of the Ji Corporation. People at his age rarely dealt with the media, so she'd better get him out of here as soon as possible. Jin Wan walked into the crowd, came to Ji Hongwon's side, and raised her hand. Everyone, I'm sorry. Most of today's press conference is about the analysis and explanation of the photos that are close to slander. As for the irrelevant topics, they are mostly family affairs. Please mind your manners. Seeing Jin Wan raise her hand to shield Ji Hongwon, Ji Mingran coldly glared at Jin Wan with reddened eyes. In order to prevent Jin Wan from being squeezed by the crowd, Ji Mingran instinctively raised his hand to shield Jin Wan. Seeing this affectionate scene between father and daughter, Ji Mingran suddenly sneered. She abruptly grabbed a camera on the shoulder of a person behind her and viciously smashed it in Jin Wan's direction. Watch out. No one expected that Ji Mingran would suddenly take such an extreme action. The camera was not small and was very heavy, and a few screams broke out from the crowd. Just as Jin Wan turned around and saw the camera smashing toward her, before she could dodge, Emo Jingshen, who had walked over, grabbed her, and quickly pulled her into his arms. At the same time, he turned his back to block the camera for her. Fortunately, Emo Jingshen had pulled her away from the camera. Even though he took the blow for her, the force of the falling camera was much less than before. It only brushed against his shoulder and then fell heavily to the ground. God, it was too dangerous. Are you all right? CEO Mo, are you all right? Chapter 643. Jin Wan was startled by the sound of the camera hitting Mo Jingshen's shoulder. She raised her eyes with a jerk and looked at the man who suddenly came to protect her in his arms. Although the angle of the camera was crooked and not too heavy, she instinctively raised her hand and put it on the man's shoulder. At the same time, she asked in a low voice that no one could hear, Mo Jingshen, are you crazy? If she didn't miss, your shoulder would have been broken by that camera. However, the man held her in his arms and lowered his eyes to look at the fear in her eyes. He curled his lips and ignored the reporters and onlookers present. He only chuckled and said, if I was really injured, there would be a reason for you, little ingrate, to stay and take care of me. Jin Wan, she didn't continue to speak. In the blink of an eye, Ji Mingran was held down by the security guards to prevent her from doing anything drastic. Second Miss Ji, are you angry out of humiliation? Mo Jingshen held on to Jin Wan's waist and did not let go. He turned to look at Ji Mingran, who was restrained by the security guards and had red eyes. Even though Mo Jingshen appeared to be smiling, anyone could sense the coldness and displeasure in him because she had almost hurt Jin Wan with her attack earlier. Ji Mingran's emotions had long slipped to the brink of collapse. Mo Jingshen, both of you are divorced. There was no relationship at all. You're actually helping her. Mo Jingshen coldly smiled and held Jin Wan tighter in his arms. When Jin Wan didn't understand what he was going to do, the man said calmly and slowly, since so many reporters are here, I'd better clarify something for Jin Wan. Hearing Mo Jingshen's words, several reporters who were closest to him put their microphones close to him. The man said flatly, whether it was 3 years ago or 3 years later, Jin Wan is always my wife. The news about our divorce is just a rumor. We have never divorced. Jin Wan instantly stiffened in his arms, and the reporters around them were even more surprised. But the divorce news that is spread like wildfire doesn't look fake. Everyone is so curious about this Mo's family matters. Mo Jingshen's mild and ordinary voice rang above Jin Wan's head. Is my verbal proof not enough to convince people of Mrs. Mo's identity? Do you want me to take out the marriage certificate and make it public? I don't think so. I never thought Miss G would actually be Mrs. M.O. Jinwan. Ji Ming-gran was in disbelief. That's impossible. That's impossible. The two of you are clearly divorced. When Jinwan went to London 3 years ago, you were already divorced. M.O. Jingshan's response to her was one emotionless sentence, whether to leave or not. As the person involved, isn't it clearer? After finishing his words, M.O. Jingshan's movements did not falter. He held Jinwan's hand and walked past the crowd, leaving the multimedia hall. Right now, the media's focus was on Ji Ming-gran. Furthermore, the misunderstanding had been cleared. M.O. Jingshan, who is usually too lazy to deal with the media, was able to deal with the media today. Naturally, no one dared to chase after him. The corridor of Shine Group was very spacious and clean. It was a completely modern building with special office facilities on each floor. The man opened the elevator door and let her in. It was quiet in the elevator for a long while. Jinwan turned to look at herself in the mirror and the man who had been quiet and indifferent. She then looked at the changing numbers in the elevator and seemed to be lost in thought. The man's low voice broke the almost stiff silence. What's wrong? Before you go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to find out your marital status, you suddenly find out that you're still Mrs. M.O. Are you feeling very complicated? Jinwan came back to herself and whispered, Did you just say that in front of the media, or are you really not divorced? He said flatly, I thought you already had a conclusion in your heart. She said with some amusement, M.O. Jingshan, it was you who forced me to divorce. I even signed the divorce papers, but you tell me you're not divorced? M.O. Jingshan was a man who would never beat around the bush and delay a problem as long as he could solve it directly. However, when it came to the divorce, he tried every possible way to force her to leave. She thought that in the past 3 years, she had nothing to do with him. Previously, she had been hoping that maybe the divorce was under his control. Since he had decided to divorce, he would definitely divorce her. But now she heard him say that he had never divorced her. How on earth did he do it? How could he be so calm when everything was clearly in his heart, in his eyes, and in his control, so that no one could see anything? She wanted to ask and had a lot to say, but she suddenly didn't know where to start. She thought for a while and picked the simplest question. After I signed the divorce papers, I sent them to you. Didn't you sign them? The man said flatly in a low voice, as you said, I was the one who proposed the divorce. Although I didn't want to force you to leave in that way. After all, I had to follow the trajectory of my life. Some things should always stand at the original position in order to continue the continuation of various events. So did you sign them or not? He replied methodically. Before I returned to the United States to take over Shine, I took some time to bring the divorce papers to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Before the final signing, I was told that the divorce could not be divorced unless both parties were present. Although I did have a way to invite the most powerful lawyer in the country to come and find a reasonable reason to divorce the marriage. According to my understanding of you, when we divorced, you didn't have the ability to make the divorce papers take effect. Jinwan, you mean the divorce papers? Jinwan didn't react for a moment and was stunned. When you left High City and went directly to the United States, I gave the signed divorce papers to a friend in the Civil Affairs Bureau and asked him to help me with the divorce. But then something happened to this friend's family, and I haven't been able to contact him. I didn't have time to go to the Civil Affairs Bureau and didn't ask carefully. The man's bony fingers casually adjusted the exquisite and expensive buttons on his shirt cuffs, and he turned his head to glance at her indifferently. So, whether in the past or now, our divorce procedures have stopped at the signing of the divorce papers, and we haven't gone to the final procedure of stamping the seal. Jinwan inexplicably read a bit of a good mood from his indifferent tone, as if this realization that he suddenly realized 3 years ago, when he was at the last step, had become the biggest reason for him to be particularly shameless in front of her now. Chapter 644. She was brought back to the office by the man. After all, it was the working hours of Shine Group, and a secretary was already waiting in the office. Seeing them come back, the secretary took a look at Jinwan, made sure she was not an outsider, and went to report some work to Mo Jingshan. Mo Jingshun didn't say anything after entering the door. After listening to the secretary's report, he took the document, read a few pages, and said a few words. It was not until the secretary left that the office was quiet again. Jinwan had been sitting in his office, but when he was busy with work, just now, she just got up and went to the water dispenser to pour a cup of hot water. But from Mo Jingshun's point of view, the woman was holding the cup and drinking water, and her expression was cold. The black pot that has been pressing on your head for 2 or 3 days has been uncovered, and the biggest problem has been solved. Are you going to repay me with such a cold face? Jinwan glanced at him deadpan. Otherwise, how do you want me to repay you? Do you want me to sacrifice myself here? The man smiled lightly. That's a good idea. Jinwan rolled her eyes at him. I'm tired and sleepy. I want to go home and sleep. She really hadn't had a good rest these days. Last night, she went to his company in the middle of the night, but she sat in the corridor for so long. In the morning, she only slept for an hour and a half in his break room. Now that the problem had been solved, she felt much more relaxed. She didn't want to think about anything but to have a good sleep and adjust her mind. And she needed time to think about how to face this man. Jinwan did look tired, and Mo Jingshun's voice softened. Then go back to rest, take a good bath, and have a good sleep. Jinwan didn't speak anymore and got up to leave. I'll drive you. No, I drove Xiaotian's car here last night. She's still in my house. I'm going to drive the car back. She needed a rest and adjust her mood. Mo Jingshun looked at her for a while, nodded, and said gently and patiently, You haven't had a good rest these days. Stay awake when you drive. Jinwan ignored him. Before she went out, the man said with a smile, Drive safely. Mrs. Mo Jinwan paused, abruptly turned around and gave him a hard look. If you call me that again, believe it or not, I'll write you another divorce agreement tomorrow. The man smiled. I believe you. Mrs. Mo Jinwan, she turned around angrily and was about to leave. The man probably saw her angry look again. He smiled lightly and said in a good mood, See you tomorrow. When Jinwan drove back to Yuehubei, Xiaotian had already left. She only sent her a WeChat message, saying that the baby at home hadn't seen his mother all night and had been crying. The nanny they hired to hold the baby all night was useless, so she hurriedly drove Jinwan's car home. Jinwan first took a bath and felt much more relaxed. Then she went back to bed, hugged the pillow, and slept hard for a day and night. The next morning, Jinwan returned to the company in a good state after the truth was revealed and the curses and dirty water poured on her were completely washed away. As for Mo Jingshun's promise to see her tomorrow, she fell asleep and didn't plan to see him at all. She was probably the only one who couldn't control this kind of scheming man. He couldn't control her mood, her freedom, and her thoughts. Occasionally, he miscalculated so that Jinwan could at least feel better. The next day, Jinwan was preparing to return home when she suddenly received an invitation from the city's newly appointed official charity organization. This charity organization had set up a banquet and invited more than half of Haicheng's famous business figures. Although it was called a charity organization, it was actually nothing more than to win over these rich people in the city. After all, the government and the business were never separated. Furthermore, for something like charity, many times it required the cooperation of businessmen. The charity banquet was set to be held tomorrow night. It was not that they didn't give Jinwan time to prepare, but that people had received invitations 3 days ago. However, Jinwan had been misunderstood by the leaders of the city because of those photos a few days ago. They thought that she was really up to no good and didn't plan to put her on the invitation list at all. In the end, the dirty water was suddenly cleared, and the higher-ups promptly issued her an invitation. Thus, when she received the invitation, there was only 1 day left until the banquet. As a result, Jinwan didn't have time to return home. She took the time to pick out a gown. At night, Jinwan lay on the bed and closed her eyes. However, she had slept too much last night and couldn't sleep well tonight. She picked up her phone and glanced at Mo Jingshun's WeChat profile picture. No matter how she looked at it, she felt unhappy. She searched for some pictures of icebergs online and sent them to Mo Jingshun. A minute after she sent it, the man replied, Jinwan, hurry up and change your profile picture. These pictures of icebergs are suitable as your profile picture. It suits your character. Don't always hang my photo on it. Mo Jingshin? Question mark. Another question mark. She didn't know if he was busy or what. Jinwan impatiently sent him another message. Hurry up and change it. This time, the man finally replied, but it was short and straightforward, infuriating. Not changing. Jinwan held her phone to her mouth and sent him a voice message. Mo Jingshin, if you use my photo as your profile picture again, do you believe that I won't blacklist you? However, the man's reply was, don't mess around, Jinwan. She abruptly threw her phone to the side of the pillow and lay there, turning to look at the night sky outside the window. In fact, after thinking about it carefully, all these years, Mo Jingshin had never done anything to let her down. If they really didn't divorce, then the knot in her heart could be considered resolved. The only thing that made her angry about him was his rationality and calmness that surpassed all emotions. A person who was too calm was actually very scary, wasn't it? She closed her eyes and was silent for a moment. Then she abruptly picked up her phone again, opened Mo Jingshin's WeChat, and very quickly added the man's WeChat to her blacklist. Seeing that he obediently stayed in the blacklist, Jinwan finally let out a breath. She turned her phone to silent with a refreshed expression and planned to sleep. However, not long after she closed her eyes, she vaguely felt a flash of light. She opened her eyes and turned her head to see that her phone screen was on. It had been on for a while. She leaned over to take a look. As expected, it was a call from Mo Jingshin. Chapter 645. It's so late. I just blacklisted you on WeChat. Do you have to call me? Can't you let me sleep well? Jinwan complained. The man said indifferently, it's so late. Do you have to blacklist me just because of a profile picture that hasn't been changed since the beginning? Jinwan, I'm going to sleep. I'll add you back when you change it. With that, Jinwan didn't wait for the man to speak, so as not to be choked by him again. She quickly hung up the phone. In AO Lawn International, the man's tall figure leaned against the doorframe. His dark and deep eyes narrowed slightly, looking at the phone screen that had darkened because the woman had hung up on him. The next morning, Jinwan got up, took a shower, and came out. When she picked up her cell phone, she saw that her number was still on the page that she had blacklisted on WeChat yesterday. She casually clicked on Mo Jingshin's profile picture in the blacklist and refreshed it for a long time. In the end, he didn't change it. That night at the charity dinner, the dinner was a very ordinary dinner, and most of the guests were famous people in the city. After returning to China, Jinwan had attended a lot of social events and dinner parties, and many people were familiar with her. Although she had washed away the dirty water that had been splashed on her a few days ago, it was inevitable that there would still be people talking about her behind her back. What's more, the fact that Jinwan was Mo Jingshin's wife shocked many people. The men who often took the opportunity to hit on her no longer dared to approach her. After all, Jinwan was already quite famous in the Chinese business world. Now that they knew that the person behind her was Mo Jingshin, no one dared to provoke her. The dinner party didn't end until 10:30 p.m. It was already 10 o'clock. Jinwan drank red wine in boredom and waited patiently for the dinner party to end. Although the men didn't dare to approach her tonight, some famous ladies or rich ladies who admired her occasionally came over to say hello to her, but most of their chats were tentative, and they all had forced smiles on their faces. They were all asking her if what CEO Mo said in the media a few days ago was true. Someone toasted her. Jinwan had drunk no more than 2 glasses of red wine here tonight, and most of the red wine was only at the bottom of the glass. She politely took it, clinked glasses with them, and talked and laughed with them as she usually did at social events, but everyone had a smile on their face and actually had their own thoughts. After drinking, they chatted for a while and then dispersed. Finally, at 10:30 p.m., the dinner party ended as scheduled. After the speeches of the city leaders, the hall was filled with thunderous applause. Jinwan played with a glass of red wine in her hand that she had just taken from a waiter. As the crowd gradually walked out, she put the half-drunk wine on the tray of a passing waiter and turned to leave. Just as Jinwan was about to walk out of the hotel, her eyes suddenly went dark. She was stunned for a few seconds before she came to her senses. She didn't know whether the power was off or the switch was tripped. Fortunately, the dinner party was over, and this place was not far from the exit. Otherwise, she didn't know how chaotic the scene would be. Jinwan lifted the hem of her gown and was about to follow the crowd out in the dark. She was surrounded by people who were rushing forward because of the sudden darkness, so the sound of footsteps approaching Jinwan was drowned out. With a bang, the handbag in Jinwan's hand fell to the ground, making a muffled sound. In the rightmost room on the 10th floor of the hotel, Sheng Yihan stood under the shower in the bathroom. The warm water fell densely like rain, and the man's tall and slender figure was shrouded in the dense white mist in the bathroom. He closed his eyes, and his breathing strangely became a little messy. He was also present at the charity dinner tonight, but after only an hour, he left because he felt unwell. His secretary learned that he was not feeling well and arranged a room for him in this hotel. From the beginning, he didn't feel anything other than an inexplicable heat. However, at this moment, as the hot water invaded his body, Sheng Yihan only felt that his body was gradually heating up. The scene of him seeing Jinwan at the dinner party kept replaying in his mind. Ever since he was chased out of the Ji family by Ji Hongwon, the one thing he had to do in this life was to swallow up everything in the Ji family, no matter what methods he had to use. Even if the Sheng family was powerful enough and didn't need the Ji family's influence, the hatred from his youth had been hidden in his heart for so many years. Some things were a lifetime shadow. Even if he didn't need it, he had to get it. Even if, in the end, he abandoned Jinwan and chose to keep Ji Mingran by his side as a puppet. Ji Mingran's various means were either clever or stupid, but every step went in the direction he expected. Except for occasionally assisting her, he didn't need to worry about anything else. After all, Ji Mingran, that idiot, could definitely turn the Ji family upside down. However, in the end, Ji Mingran's wish didn't come true. Sheng Yihan didn't show up for what happened some time ago, but he knew everything that happened. Why didn't he show up? Perhaps it was because the person Ji Mingran was targeting was Jinwan, the only person in the Ji family whom he had been thinking about for a long time, but could only watch from afar. Even though so many years had passed and the shadow of his youth was still there, the obsession of his youth was still buried deep in his heart. He thought of Jinwan tonight. She was wearing a light-colored, off-shoulder gown, which was very simple, clean, and elegant. She had light makeup on her face. The pretty face that had haunted his world for many years seemed to have not changed after so many years. Except for the wrinkles between her brows that had increased with the passage of time, she was still the samer. For a moment, he even hoped to see Jinwan hiding in the crowd, quietly holding a glass of wine and finally falling drunk in a corner so that he could have a chance to carry her out. Then, when she slapped his face with the back of her hand in a daze and asked him who he was, he didn't have to tell her that he would be her brother living under the same roof in the future, but that he would tell her that he was Sheng Yihan. Probably because of that thought, he felt a burning sensation in his lower abdomen, and the inexplicable turmoil in his body made him feel uncomfortable, so he withdrew his gaze and left. However, he didn't expect that when he took a shower in his room, he would roughly realize what was going on in his body. She wanted to destroy Jinwan. She wanted to destroy Jinwan with him. Normally, Sheng Yihan would never be used by Ji Mingran, but now his only weakness was right in front of him. Destroying her was equivalent to destroying himself. It was just mutual destruction, so what was wrong with that? Sheng Yihan stood by the bed for a while, slowly stretched out his hand, and gently touched the woman's fair and blushing face. That spring festival many years ago, on the Ji family sofa, the scene of him pressing her down on the sofa under the influence of alcohol and almost ripping off her clothes came back to his mind again. The softness of pressing her under his body and holding her in his arms, the feeling that was as smooth as porcelain, and the endless desire he had for this woman since many years ago. As the heat in his lower body rose again, it gnawed at his rationality again and again. In particular, the woman on the bed was too quiet. She was not as distant, cold and disgusted as she usually was when she saw him. She was still so fair and smooth. Her thick and long eyelashes lay quietly under her eyelids, and her breathing was even. She was like a princess who had accidentally fallen asleep because she had bitten a poisonous apple, waiting for her man to kiss her awake. The woman who had haunted his mind for so many years, the reason why he hated other women so much, was the one in front of him. She lay there obediently. Should he do it? He had drugged her. From her face, he could tell she had also been drugged, but he didn't know how the other party had made her fall asleep. But as long as he had her tonight, even if Mo Jingshin could tolerate her for one night and still love her in the palm of his hand, given Jin Wan's character, it was impossible for her to return to Mo Jingshin's side. And if he guessed right, the media had been informed and would definitely wait outside the room tonight or tomorrow morning, waiting to capture the scene of Mrs. Mo having an affair. None of this would harm his interests except that it would directly offend Mo Jingshin. But it was not the first time that he had provoked Mo Jingshin. If he was really afraid of the Mo family, he wouldn't be Sheng Yihan today. Jin Wan, this name, as well as this seductive, crimson face when she was asleep, kept replaying in his mind and in front of his eyes. Little by little, Sheng Yihan's reason was hollowed out by the scorching heat under him. Even if, after this night, he still couldn't get anything except her body, he still wanted it very much. The man lowered his head and slowly approached the woman on the bed. This woman should have belonged to him. When they were in the Ji family, he shouldn't have felt pity for her. He should have taken her as his own early. Maybe in the future, there would be no story between her and Mo Jingshin. Even if he was hated, at least he would be the one who entangled with her for the rest of his life. Just when Sheng Yihan's thin lips were about to fall on the woman's red lips, Jin Wan suddenly woke up from her sleep. Before she could react, she saw the man's face right in front of her. She trembled in fright and instinctively turned her face to the side. The man's kiss didn't land on her lips, but it brushed past the corner of her mouth and landed a kiss on it. Seeing the woman who had been sleeping suddenly move, the fire in Sheng Yihan's eyes suddenly burned fiercely. He lowered his eyes and stared at her. The moment Jin Wan was kissed on the corner of her mouth, all her hair stood on end. Before she had time to think about what had happened, she only remembered that in the dim light of the banquet hall, someone seemed to cover her mouth, and then there was a pungent smell. Then she knew nothing, but she didn't expect that the moment she woke up, it was Sheng Yihan she saw. The nightmare she had in the Ji family when she was a teenager seemed to come back to her mind in an instant. Her whole body tensed up, and when the man who leaned over to kiss her paused, she abruptly turned her eyes and looked at him defensively. "Did you order someone to drug me?" Chapter 647. Jin Wan's eyes were still a little confused. She could only recognize that the person in front of her was Sheng Yihan, but after she woke up, she felt a heat in her body that seemed to have been suppressed for a long time because she had been in a coma. She had been drugged before, so she immediately knew what was going on. Jin Wan hurriedly sat up in bed, but perhaps because she had been forced to inhale too much of the drug, she only got up for a moment before lying back down feebly. She could only watch Sheng Yihan standing by the bed and looking down at her, as if watching a weak person struggling in a cage. She immediately clutched the sheets under her and glared at him coldly. "How dare you drug me? Sheng Yihan, I know you are despicable and shameless, but now you are so shameless that it disgusts me." Sheng Yihan smiled and accepted her scolding, but his hand gently stroked her face. Jin Wan stiffened all over because of his touch. The man's hand was also shockingly hot, but she only felt as if there was a cold viper crawling on her face, and this snake was even spitting its tongue at her, swearing that he might succeed tonight. It made her shudder. With my status, if I didn't live a despicable and shameless life, how could I control the entire Sheng family? The man whispered hoarsely and slowly bent down. "Jin Wan, you should have been my woman a long time ago." Just as his hand was about to touch her lips, Jin Wan suddenly opened her mouth and bit hard on his finger. Sheng Yihan didn't move. Even though he was in pain and bleeding from her bite, he still didn't rush to withdraw his hand. Instead, he He put another finger in her mouth and patiently teased her tongue. There was blood on his finger in Jinwan's mouth, and she was so disgusted by his action that she spat out his hand. She sat up on the bed with an ugly face and could only shrink back a little with the little strength she had. Finally, she leaned against the headboard and curled up, her eyes full of wariness and alienation. I'm warning you, stop. Don't be so heartless. If you dare to touch me, I'll definitely hack you to pieces. However, as soon as Jinwan finished speaking, the man got on the bed and slowly approached her like a beast lurking in the night. When Jinwan tightened her body and looked at him in disbelief, he had come up to her. He looked down at the woman on the bed and smiled. The heat in his eyes did not diminish at all, but seemed to burn even more fiercely. How do you want to cut it? Like this? Sheng Yihan's kiss fell on her chin. Jinwan hurriedly turned her face away, so he only kissed her chin. But the next moment, the man moved up and was about to kiss her lips accurately and firmly. The nightmare she had almost forgotten pierced her reason like needles. Jinwan screamed and raised her hand to push the man away. When Sheng Yihan's face was very close to hers, she desperately pushed against him and let out a low, trembling cry like a trapped beast. Don't. If the man in front of her was someone else, she wouldn't be so panicked, but this man was Sheng Yihan, the Sheng Yihan who almost pressed her down on the sofa of the Ji family and raped her when she was a teenager. It was the Sheng Yihan who scared her so much that she ran to stand under a tree in winter for a whole night and finally got cold all over. Go away. Jinwan pushed him and tried to get out of the bed, but Sheng Yihan ignored her resistance and bent down to press her down. Jinwan hurriedly rolled away on the bed with all her strength at the moment he pressed her down, and when the man reached out to grab her back, she continued to roll away hard. She rolled off the edge of the bed and fell heavily on the ground. The pain made her bite her lip hard. She struggled to support herself on the ground with her injured arm and slowly sat up. The moment she got up, she saw Sheng Yihan sitting on the bed in only a bathrobe. His eyes were playful, passionate, and as if he was watching her, who was destined to be unable to escape tonight, looking at her flustered look. He seemed to be watching a good show, and the playful look in his eyes made Jinwan burst into anger. She grabbed the high-heeled shoes that someone had taken off her feet and threw them hard at his face. Sheng Yihan didn't dodge. The shoes hit him on the shoulder and fell to the side of the bed, making a muffled sound. Seeing that he was not threatening at all, Jinwan staggered to her feet, put her hands on the edge of the bed, and then turned to support herself on the table beside the bed. She looked for the door, took 2 steps forward, and tried to escape. However, just as Jinwan staggered a few steps toward the door, her waist suddenly tightened, and she was suddenly pulled back by the man's arm. At the same time, he held her firmly in his arms. The man's hot breath was pressed against the back of her neck, and he said hoarsely, "Don't struggle. I said the door has been locked from the outside. Do you believe me? Let me go." Jinwan struggled desperately in his arms. "Don't touch me. Let me go. Let me go. Oh. Jinwan felt that Sheng Yihan's lips were touching her from the back of her neck to the exposed back and shoulders of the gown, and her stomach was churning with waves of nausea. She kept struggling, using both hands and feet, but her mouth was covered and she couldn't speak. She tried to bite him several times, but he covered her mouth so hard that she couldn't open her mouth at all. Oh! The zipper on the back of the gown suddenly made a swish. It was the sound of the gown being pulled open. Jinwan trembled all over and hurriedly began a new round of desperate struggle, only to be abruptly thrown onto the bed by Sheng Yihan. The moment Jinwan fell onto the bed, she hurriedly crawled to the side, only to be pulled back by the ankle by the man, who then bent down and pressed her under his body. Chapter 648. When Jinwan almost cried out, Sheng Yihan was confused by her fragile appearance for a moment and didn't notice that Jinwan had bent her legs when he was not paying attention. Sheng Yihan's lower body was suddenly hit hard by her knee. He groaned in pain and froze on top of her. Jinwan looked at the man whose face suddenly turned pale with tears and pushed him away with all her strength. When Sheng Yihan reached out to grab her back to the bed, she rolled to the edge of the bed again, staggered to the ground, and slowly stood up. While he was in pain and couldn't get up so quickly, she moved to the door as quickly as possible. But when she reached the door, Jin-won tugged at the door lock in a panic, only to find that the door was really locked from the outside. Locked from the outside? She forced herself to calm down and regain some rationality. The temperature on Shang Yihan's body was also unusual, and the door was locked from the outside, which meant that she had been sent in without his knowledge. He was also drugged. Even if the door couldn't be opened, Jin-won immediately let go of the door lock, leaned stiffly against the door, and didn't even knock on the door to ask for help. The man on the bed slowly sat up and turned to look at the blushing and shocked woman leaning against the door. After a few glances, he chuckled hoarsely and said in a hoarse voice, "I told you, the door was locked from the outside, but you didn't believe me." Hearing his voice, Jin-won shivered instinctively and turned to look at him. "Is it Jimin Gran? The person who understands my feelings for you and wants to use me to destroy you. Other than her, there can't be anyone else," Shang Yihan said as he slowly got out of bed. His eyes were still filled with desire that could almost swallow her. He approached her step by step. "This door can't be opened even if it can. You should have guessed that there may be reporters and media people outside the door at any time. Once you and I are photographed in the same room, both disheveled and blushing, Mo Jingshin's head will be put on a big green hat." Jin-won watched as he approached her, leaning hard against the door. Her heart felt as though a large piece of emptiness had fallen into her heart. Mo Jingshin had just said in front of the media that she was Mrs. Mo, and this news was still very popular. Almost everyone who read the news said that CEO Mo's public display of affection was too delicious, and there were too many people who envied and hated Jin-won as Mrs. Mo. If she was photographed coming out of a man's room like this, even Mo Jingshin wouldn't be able to save her. If that happened, even Mo Jingshin would not be able to save her and might even drag him down with her. Just as Jin-won clenched her fists, Shang Yihan had come over. Breathing in the man's scent, Jin-won shivered again. "You were drugged, weren't you? You wouldn't do such a stupid thing when you're sober. Don't tell me you're willing to be used by Jimin Gran?" He chuckled, leaned down, and put his hand on the door behind her. He lowered his eyes to look at her red and guarded little face. "Of course I won't let her use me, but the woman who was sent to my bed is you, so I can only accept her kindness." Jin-won raised her hand against his chest as he approached her as he spoke. Her mind was in a trance, and she almost lost control of herself to hold the man who had brought her countless nightmares. The impulse to tear off her clothes made her heart fall to the bottom of the abyss. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and forced herself to stay rational. She pushed him hard again. However, not only did he not push her, but Shang Yihan even turned his arm, which had just been propped against the door panel behind her around her waist, drew her into his arms, and bent down to kiss her neck. Jin-won's hair and goosebumps rose all over. She kept resisting, but he held her tightly in his arms. "Jin-won." Shang Yihan held her firmly, and his voice was hoarse and almost intoxicated in her neck. "I've loved you for so many years, but I couldn't get your heart. If I take away everything that belongs to you in the G family, at least you'll always hate me. At least you'll still have an inch of space for me in your heart. At least you won't forget me, no matter how many years have passed. You lunatic, let me go. But you're right in front of me. Even if I don't have this drug, I can't let you go as long as you're lying in my bed like this, let alone in this situation. How can I let you go?" Shang Yihan's voice was hoarse, so hoarse that it made her flustered, but his burning hand still held her waist tightly. "Since we're dragging each other down, even after tonight, when I destroy you, it's the same as destroying me. I won't regret it." "Shang Yihan, wake up." Jin-won felt that he was crazy. He must be crazy. However, at this moment, the man pressed his lips against her ear, and the hot breath from his mouth entered her earlobe. "I'm very sober, Jin-won. I know very well how you've become a terrible nightmare over the years. You've always existed in my dreams, making me feel disgusted with other women except for you in my dreams. Now that the real you is in front of me, how can I not enjoy it?" Shang Yihan's words seemed affectionate, But the more Jean Wan listened, the more she trembled. When did she become his nightmare? He was clearly her biggest nightmare many years ago. When she heard that he had touched her in his dreams, she felt even more disgusted and frightened. She raised her leg and was about to attack his lower body again. This time, Sheng Yihan was prepared. He pressed her leg with one hand and put the other hand into her unzipped back. As soon as his hand touched her smooth and white back, Jean Wan suddenly trembled and screamed as if she was about to explode. "Don't touch me." Perhaps because Jean Wan's voice was too sad and shrill, Sheng Yihan's hand paused. Taking advantage of this pause, Jean Wan was about to push him away, but she suddenly felt a pain on her neck. Sheng Yihan suddenly bit her on the neck. Jean Wan fought back the pain, but it was this kind of pain that kept her sober. She looked around sharply and caught a glimpse of a transparent crystal ashtray on the table shelf not far from the window. Chapter 649. Sheng Yihan narrowed his eyes because of the pain and numbness in his calf. At the moment he froze, Jean Wan attacked his other calf. He thought she was going to attack his lower body, but he didn't expect her to attack his calf again. This time, even though he raised his hand to dodge in time, he failed to dodge and was successfully kicked by Jean Wan. A strange pain and numbness came from his calf bones. Sheng Yihan didn't expect Jean Wan to be so skilled. In his memory, she hadn't learned any self-defense skills. Even if she had, she couldn't be so skilled. However, Jean Wan didn't even look at him. She gritted her teeth and pushed him away. When Sheng Yihan was temporarily unable to support himself because of the pain and numbness in his legs, she pushed him back 2 steps. At the moment she successfully got out of his arms, Jean Wan was grateful to Feng Ling for what she had taught her. At first, she only learned the acupoints on the upper body, including the hands and arms. However, before leaving London, Feng Ling spent another week teaching her the acupoints on the legs. However, because she learned in a hurry, Jean Wan had never used this method. Earlier, she was just taking a gamble. She didn't expect that she would really kick the right place. However, Sheng Yihan used to be an orthopedic doctor. After being shocked by Jean Wan's trick of attacking the acupoints on the calf, he calmed down in less than half a minute. After confirming that there would be no problem except the pain in his legs, he saw that Jean Wan had rushed to the window, and the tightly closed curtains fluttered slightly because of her rushing speed. What was she doing there? She couldn't go out of the door. Was she going to jump out of the window? This was the 10th floor of the hotel. As soon as this idea came to his mind, Sheng Yihan suddenly endured the pain and hurried over. "Jean Wan, come back." The man's legs were too long. Jean Wan rushed to the table in front of the window and leaned against it to adjust her breathing, which was disorderly because of the drug, when he came over in 3 or 4 steps. He grabbed her arm and brought her back into his arms. At the same time, he pressed her tightly in his arms. "Even if you break my legs today, I won't let go of you. Don't struggle. I don't know how much drug was put in the wine. At least you want it now, don't you?" Jean Wan's hand reached back, clutched the corner of the table, and said in a trembling voice, "Sheng Yihan, I'll give you one last chance. Let go of me. Don't touch me." However, the man chuckled at her weak threat, as though he thought she was too naive. He bent down and kissed her ear. At the same time, he said resolutely, "Tonight here, you are mine." Before he finished his words, Jean Wan's hand had mercilessly swung down on his head. With a muffled sound of a heavy object hitting his skull, Sheng Yihan suddenly stiffened all over. Jean Wan leaned against the table, trembling all over, watching the man who had been holding her tightly slowly let go of his hand on her back, took a look at her in disbelief, and then slowly fell down until he fell heavily to the ground. The moment he fell to the ground, Sheng Yihan could hardly speak. His eyes were fixed on the heavy crystal ashtray in Jean Wan's hand. Seeing the obvious blood on the corner of the ashtray and Jean Wan trembling but still holding the ashtray, he stared at her for a long time until the dim light blurred, and he closed his eyes. Jean Wan looked at the man who fell heavily to the ground. Just now, she had put all her strength into her hand to hit him, hitting the back of his head. She didn't know whether she had hit him hard or not, but seeing such a tall man like Shang Yihan suddenly fall to the ground, and then seeing his white bathrobe, which was almost dyed red by the blood flowing from the back of his head, Jinwan trembled and threw the ashtray to the ground. Her hands and feet were weak, and she staggered to the ground, almost unable to get up. Did she kill someone? She didn't figure out the acupuncture point on the back of his head just now. She didn't know whether it would be fatal or not, but she had no other way to protect herself. She had given him a chance. She couldn't tell what kind of fear surrounded her in an instant. Jinwan's teeth were chattering with fear. Seeing more and more blood flowing from the back of his head and the shocking blood-stained bathrobe behind his shoulders, Jinwan sat on the ground and kept backing away slowly until she reached the curtains. Leaning against the cold window, she forced herself to calm down. However, the fear that filled the sky and the crazily intertwined fiery desire in her body almost burned her up. She almost forgot when was the last time she was drugged. However, the effect at that time was obviously not as powerful as this time. In the past 3 years, even this medicine had been improved by who knew how many times. She leaned against the window to calm down for a long time, but the smell of blood in her nose still made endless fear surround her. She didn't dare to look at Shang Yihan on the ground, and didn't know how long he had been lying motionless and unconscious. Thinking about it, she felt that even if she did it to protect herself, it was also a crime to kill him. She took a breath, put her hand on the window behind her, and stood up little by little. Then she began to look for the landline in the room, only to find that the phone line had been cut off. Did Ji Minggran cut it off when she was sent in, to prevent her from calling for help? She didn't even know where her cell phone was now. Jinwan's legs were weak, and the feeling of emptiness and warmth in her lower body made her so weak that she almost fell on the bed, and she couldn't help making some uncontrollable sounds. She raised her hand and bit her finger hard, forcing herself to stay awake. And at the same time, she looked around for the clothes Shang Yihan had changed before he took a shower. When she found his shirt and trousers, she quickly rushed over and took out his cell phone. Even if his cell phone had a password, in this case, she could call the emergency police. She quickly dialed 110, but she couldn't explain clearly that both of them were drugged and that there might be reporters outside. She only said that someone here was injured and needed help immediately, or he might die. After hanging up the phone, she didn't know if the police would take this matter seriously or send someone immediately, but now she had no choice but to wait. Chapter 650. It was just a simple action of unzipping the zipper, but it made her feel hotter all over. She didn't know how long she could hold on. She even had an unconscious thought that even if the man lying on the ground was like a nightmare to her, he was still very tempting to her. After all, he was a man. She continued to bite her fingers, only to find that even the pain was useless. She took a deep breath, staggered to her feet, and rushed into the bathroom. She turned on the shower head and quickly changed the cold water to blue. It wasn't until the ice-cold water drenched her heart that she finally felt the terrifying heat being suppressed a little. However, there's also a certain kind of heat that was slowly drilling out of her body, forming a terrible feeling of alternating hot and cold with the ice-cold outside of her body. The heat seemed to want to drill out of her body, as if two mutually contending things were constantly tearing at the surface of her skin, and the one who was hurt and feeling the pain was her own body. Jinwan didn't know how long she had been tortured by this terrible alternating hot and cold. Various vivid scenes kept appearing in her mind. She raised her head and let the cold water wash her face. She leaned against the wall weakly and bumped her head back again and again in vain, as if even this pain couldn't compare to the pain of the cold and hot tearing on the surface of her skin. While Jinwan was being tortured in the bathroom of the hotel room, several reporters who had been contacted by Ji Minggran had been waiting outside the room. There seemed to be some sound coming from the room for a while, but now there was no movement. These reporters were all new newspapers and magazines from small underground workshops. They had nothing to do with other large media and did their jobs as long as they were paid. There were 4 or 5 of them in total. Seeing that there was no movement, someone directly called Ji Minggran. "Hello, Second Miss Ji. There's been no movement for a long time. I don't know if it has been done. Would you like to come and see for yourself? I know it's not convenient for you to show up, second Miss G, but this is a critical moment. Are we afraid of making mistakes? After all, if you want to ruin Jean Wan with this kind of thing, we have to listen to your instructions. The person who was on the phone was about to speak when suddenly a low and cold voice rang from the corner of the VIP elevator in the corridor. Ruin Jean Wan? How many lives do you have? For the first time, there was such a voice that made these reporters, who had always been good at secretly filming all kinds of entertainment stars cheating scandals or rich and powerful scandals, feel a sense of fear in their hearts. A few reporters who were hiding in the corner with cameras immediately looked in that direction. Perhaps it was because the man's black clothes were cold from the autumn night, or perhaps it was because the man was walking toward them. His gaze paused on the room Jean Wan was trapped in, and his cold aura caused one's heart to tremble. Nothing should have happened to the banquet Jean Wan attended tonight. After all, it was a charity banquet arranged by the city leaders. No one in their right mind would play tricks on such an occasion. However, Ji Mingran was different. When she was forced into a corner, she dared to use any despicable means to destroy her own path of retreat. After learning that there was a power outage at the end of the banquet, Jean Wan disappeared. In less than an hour, on the way to the hotel where the incident happened, he suddenly learned that there was something wrong with some of the red wine at the banquet tonight. Many of the glasses had been drugged. From that moment on, Mo Jingshan's eyes were surging with a murderous intent. It was as though there were no visible waves in his eyes. The reporters were shocked that Mo Jingshan would actually arrive. They all rushed to stand up from the corner, only to see the man's handsome face. His features were cold and deep, and his face was extremely expressionless. When he walked past the reporters, he coldly ordered the person behind him, "Take them away." Then he glanced at them, stepped on the cameras that were instantly smashed to the ground in the reporter's hands, and walked straight toward the door. Shenmu promptly snatched the room card from a reporter's hand and the key to the directional lock that only hotel staff could use, and quickly walked over to hand them to Mo Jingshan. The moment the door was opened, a pungent smell of blood wafted over. The first thing Mo Jingshan saw was Sheng Yihan lying motionless on the carpet inside, and the places on his body that had been dyed red with blood. Shenmu also saw this scene the moment he stepped in, and his expression immediately changed to one of shock. Mo Jingshan coldly glanced at the man on the ground who he didn't know was dead or alive. Hearing the sound of water in the bathroom, he decisively stepped into the bathroom. The moment he opened the door, Jean Wan was kneeling on the ground in a sorry state. The cold water kept pouring down on her head, making the air in the bathroom cold. The little woman's face was pale from the cold water, and her lips were bloodless. She frowned and closed her eyes as if she was enduring great pain. The obvious bite mark on her neck had become red and swollen from being washed by the water for too long. Jean Wan was still trapped in the torment of alternating hot and cold. All of a sudden, the cold water above her head was turned off. She opened her eyes in confusion and vaguely saw a familiar black figure in front of her. A warm hand suddenly touched her wet head to prevent her from hitting the wall mechanically. At the same time, the man's low voice that seemed to be full of heartache rang in her ears. "Don't hit me again." She opened her eyes, but because her mind was no longer clear, she suspected that she was hallucinating. She even suspected that what she saw was just an illusion. She did not move, but frowned and said in a hoarse voice, "No matter who you are, don't touch me." Seeing that she couldn't stay awake at all, Mo Jingshan was about to pick her up from the ground. But the moment the man held her waist, Jean Wan suddenly trembled as if she had been electrocuted. Had Sheng Yihan woken up? What else did he want to do? She hurriedly struggled. "Don't touch me. Let go. Don't touch me." She screamed hoarsely and lowered her head to bite his arm. Mo Jingshan was bitten, but he held her tighter and decisively lifted her up from the cold, wet tile floor. He bent down and kissed her comfortingly on her wet forehead. He pressed his lips against her forehead and gently said, "Don't be afraid. It's me. Let go. Don't hold me. Don't touch me." Jean Wan waved her hands and feet as if she couldn't hear him. Chapter 651. Jean Wan's desperate struggle froze as her face was forcefully pressed against his chest. Her five senses seemed to have been catalyzed by the drug, and it was as though she could not feel anything except for her sense of smell. At the very least, the moment she pressed against his chest, she caught a whiff of the unique, cold, and floral fragrance that only Mo Jingshin had on his body. By her ear was the man's patient, gentle voice. "It's me. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid." Mo Jingshin? Jean Wan's stiff body seemed to soften in an instant. She shrank weakly in his arms, letting the man carry her steadily. She pressed her head against his chest and deeply breathed in his scent, as if she was repeatedly confirming whether he was Mo Jingshin or not. The man was about to carry her out of the bathroom when he suddenly heard a sobbing voice in his arms. Mo Jingshin. Perhaps it was this voice, or perhaps it was because the woman in his arms was too hot, but the man's eyes deepened. It had been too long since he heard Jean Wan call his name in such a soft and dependent voice, and it had been too long since he felt such a strong need from her. Mo Jingshin didn't expect that he had plotted for so many years just to let her live well. Even if the price he had to pay was that she wouldn't forgive or understand him, even if he could no longer have her, he would gladly endure it. He had long guessed and accepted the price, but in fact, what he was really waiting for was the day she was willing to turn back, the day she was willing to lean against him like this. Lowering his eyes to look at the little woman in his arms whose pale cheeks gradually revealed a bit of a charming blush, Mo Jingshin's voice became hoarse when he opened his mouth to reply. "Is it very uncomfortable?" Jean Wan raised her hand. Her fingers were still trembling. She tremblingly grabbed the collar of his shirt. "I don't want to stay here." "All right, let's go home." Mo Jingshin carried Jean Wan out of the bathroom. Before leaving, the man paused. Out of the corner of his eyes, he coldly looked at the person on the ground whose bathrobe was half stained with blood, and then at the mess in the room. He coldly ordered, "Shun Mu, clean it up." "All right." Shun Mu stood aside and nodded cautiously. He knew very well how much self-control CEO Mo had to keep from kicking Sheng Yihan out of the window on the 10th floor. After what happened tonight, not only would the Sheng family's name be removed from High City, but even the reporters who were paid to do their jobs would not be able to see the light of day. Most people who dared to provoke Mo Jingshin could still be saved, but those who dared to drug Jean Wan and send her to Sheng Yihan's room were really tired of living. Back then, after Zhou Yinyan drugged Jean Wan, Zhou Yinyan's fate was turned upside down. In the end, the Zhou family and the forces behind the Zhou family were turned upside down. Zhou Yinyan was tortured for 2 months and finally died, tragically on the way abroad while being escorted by her family. Jean Wan didn't know what had happened behind the scenes, but it could be seen that this time, Ji Mingran had really knocked into the muzzle of the gun. The public opinion had ruined her reputation, disqualified her from inheriting the G Corporation's assets, and caused the studio's funds to be frozen overnight. This was only a small punishment. Now, she was using the worst methods on Jean Wan, even if she would end up like Zhou Yinyan, or even worse. "So, Mo, what about Sheng Yihan?" Shamu paused and finally asked. Mo Jingshin lowered his eyes and looked at the woman in his arms, who had been cold because of the water, but now gradually became hot again. Jean Wan's dress was still on her body, but it was wet and heavy and uncomfortable. The man's slender and well-defined fingers gently touched the place on her neck where Sheng Yihan had bitten her, and the coldness that flashed across his eyes was too obvious. Without saying a word, he turned sideways in front of the door with Jean Wan in his arms and walked out. The room was quiet and full of the smell of blood. Shen Mu saw the killing intent hidden under the surface of the iceberg in Mo Jingshin's eyes, but because it was Jean Wan who attacked him, even if Sheng Yihan deserved to die, he couldn't let her take his life. Otherwise, even if Mo Jingshin had the ability to correct Jean Wan's behavior as self-defense, Jean Wan herself would collapse. These things had to be dealt with first. Half an hour later, AO Lawn International. Hearing the sound of the password-protected door, Jean Wan opened her eyes with difficulty, only to see the man's handsome face and the password-protected door open. At a glance, She recognized where this place was. She bit her lip. On the way to the car, she almost couldn't help pouncing on this man. But there was a driver in the car, and Jingshin had been holding her, so she couldn't control herself and could only rub back and forth in his arms. However, there were times when she sobered up. She couldn't stand her unrestrained behavior and bit her lip several times to sober up, but her lips bled and the heat in her body didn't fade. When the man carried her into the house and put her on the sofa, Jinwon was sober. She told herself to calm down, but her hand still clung to the man's neck uncontrollably and refused to let go. Her face was buried deep in his shoulder, and she kept moaning in pain. Because of her strength, Jingshin was forced to fall down with her when he put her on the sofa. He looked at her blushing face, and his eyes darkened. "It's okay. You won't feel uncomfortable in a while." And Jinwon didn't know what he was going to do. The man held her waist with one hand to prevent her from moving because of insecurity and picked up his cell phone with the other hand to call Sighting. The call went through, but it was very noisy on the other side. Sighting was obviously not at home or in the hospital. Jingshin asked seriously. Jinwon was drugged. If she doesn't go to the hospital, will she have any problems? Sighting. That drug? Jingshin looked at the woman under him who was obviously suffering. He wasn't sure how severe the drug Ji-min-gran had drugged her, but he knew it was not simple from her state. Sighting immediately came to himself, walked to a quiet place, and chuckled. That kind of drug usually doesn't harm the body, and it's useless to go to the hospital. She seems to be lying obediently without struggling or moving, but her body is also suffering when she falls asleep. It's just that others can't see her movements, so instead of going to the hospital and asking the doctor to give her a tranquilizer to deceive herself, it's better to solve it at home. Anyway, she's your woman. The easiest way is to accompany her for a night. Don't tell me you're so reserved at this time. Chapter 652. It's just something with an aphrodisiac effect. There's a difference between an increased dose and a normal dose. If we're talking about harm, Jinwon was drugged, but the one who's harmed is you. After all, if she was drugged with an extremely large dose, you'd have to be mentally prepared to fight for a day and a night. She might keep pestering you for it. Jingshin's voice was heavy. Did I call just to listen to your nonsense? Who knows what type of drug your woman was drugged with? This kind of thing is too common in the black market abroad and in the country. Even if you go to the hospital for a blood test, it'll take at least 1 or 2 hours for the results to come out. In the end, it'll still be the same drug, and she'll have to suffer for so long for nothing. TSK, don't tell me you're afraid that if you take advantage of her while she's unconscious, she'll fall out with you when she wakes up? Jingshin, you actually have times when you're so apprehensive? If you're really afraid she'll fall out with you, there's only one way. Throw her into a cold bathtub for a night. Remember to put some ice in the bathtub every hour, but the price is that after the drug wears off, she might get frostbite or catch a serious cold. Jingshin cursed softly, hung up the phone, and threw it to the side. When he lowered his head, he saw the little woman lying on the sofa. Her cheeks were red and delicate, and her eyes were blurry and wet. The wet gown stuck to her body, making her look extremely disheveled, but it also added to her seductiveness. Any normal man who saw this scene would most likely tear off her gown and strip her clean. Of course, Jingshin was normal. When this little woman kept twisting in his arms in the car, if it weren't for his strong self-control, he most likely would have pressed her against the car and made her his from the inside out. He would have carved his mark on her body and into her bones. Not to mention such a scene right now. Her gown stuck to her body and outlined the contours of her body. She didn't even notice that one of the straps had fallen off. Her long hair fell on her shoulders and back like seaweed. She lay on the sofa and looked at him with teary eyes. This woman hadn't looked at him with such a seductive gaze for a long time. Her cheeks were white and rosy, and she was so beautiful that she couldn't be compared to anyone else. Every inch of her was a signal that beckoned for him to ruthlessly ravage her. And Jingshin lowered his eyes to look at her. His Adam's apple bobbed, and his long legs pressed down her mischievous legs that kept moving. His long and strong fingers held the woman's chin, and he lowered his head to give a soothing kiss between her eyebrows. Just as Jinwan raised her head to take the initiative to kiss him, she found that his kiss only fell on her forehead. Her body and heart were inexplicably wrapped around her, making her writhe unhappily under him. The little woman's hands had already unconsciously climbed up his shirt. Her hot and soft fingers were randomly pulling at the buttons of his shirt, but there was no order to her actions. Emo Jingshin chuckled softly, raising his hand to hold her hand that was acting wildly on his body. Even though he knew that she was not sober enough, he still patiently hung over her. He bent down and pressed his forehead against hers, speaking huskily. "I've said it before. In the future, as long as I don't get your permission, I definitely won't act recklessly. Be obedient and don't seduce me, and—" The man's tone was very deliberate. Hearing his words, her heart immediately surged with anger. When she was drunk and had a fever, he could do it with her all night. And now he actually said such words to her. Did he really think that she couldn't remember anything now that she was unconscious? She abruptly stopped moving back and forth under him. Anyway, she knew that this was AO Lawn International, so she wasn't completely unconscious. She just had to endure the discomfort. Compared to being deliberately kept in suspense by this man and finally begging him to bully her, her face was more important. If you don't want it, then don't. Jinwan closed her eyes and no longer looked at him. She treated the man on top of her as a pig's head, as a creature that was not a man, to maintain her composure. However, her voice was still panting as she said hoarsely, "I've been drugged. Otherwise, do you think I would beg you?" He lowered his head to look at her expression of wanting to save face, no matter what, and smiled thinly. "Are you sure? I don't want it. If I really can't take it anymore, at most." She paused and gritted her teeth before saying, "There's an adult toy shop downstairs. I'll ask someone to buy something to replace it." Emo Jingshin knew that she was being forced into a corner and could not help but laugh. "Am I not more comfortable than that kind of thing?" Earlier, Jinwan was already extreme enough to say those words. Hearing that he was actually laughing, she was so angry that she raised her hand to slap his face. In any case, she was even capable of killing someone with an ashtray tonight. What was there to be afraid of? Emo Jingshin easily caught her wrist and pressed it against the sofa by her head. Jinwan's entire body was burning up, but her mind was trying hard to remind herself that this bastard was Emo Jingshin. She had clearly blacklisted him on WeChat earlier. Right now, even if she had to hold it in, she definitely would not do it with him. Should I praise you for having such great willpower? Even in such a situation, you don't forget to be angry at me. What willpower? It's not like I can't endure this bit of drug. You've already endured it. How can I not endure it? Jinwan widened her eyes to look at him. Her breathing was hurried, and her voice was still trembling like silk. Besides, even if you didn't rush over to save me tonight, wouldn't I still be able to endure a night of soaking in cold water? Don't think that just because you help me again, I'll beg you with tears of gratitude. Emo Jingshin, don't even think about it. Faced with Jinwan's stubbornness, Emo Jingshin did not speak further. Instead, he directly carried the woman on the sofa horizontally. "What are you doing?" Jinwan's body was once again suspended in the air. The desire in her body that she had tried so hard to suppress leapt up again. Her entire body trembled in his arms, and the moisture in her eyes deepened. The man carried her in the direction of the bathroom. "If you don't want it, I can't really force you. Do you mean that soaking in cold water is very comfortable?" Jinwan, "In any case, it's more comfortable than you using it." He smiled mildly. "Very good." These two words caused Jinwan's scalp to turn numb. She suspected that Emo Jingshin was about to unleash his beastly heart and press her into the bathtub to fondle her. Although her heart was very resistant, her body was very obedient and expectant. Chapter 653. However, To Jinwan's relief and relief, Mo Jingshin didn't do anything to her, but put her into the bathtub with her clothes still on. First, the cold water poured down from the top of her head. Jinwan had just returned from the cold shower in the hotel, but now that she was suddenly drenched in cold water again, she subconsciously cried out in surprise. However, the cold water was adjusted to warm water, and the man's voice came from above her head. Do you want cold water or warm water? Mo Jingshin was not standing within the range of the shower, so the water didn't touch his clothes. Only the rising steam obscured her vision, and she could only see the man's black shirt when she raised her head. Warm, warm water. Jinwan shivered in the water. The warm water gradually increased in the bathtub. Although it wasn't as unbearably cold as cold water, the warmth of the warm water caused her body temperature to rise. Previously in the hotel room, she was afraid that she couldn't control herself, so she took a cold shower. Now, she didn't want herself to catch a cold or have a fever the next day. She would rather warm herself in the warm water to prevent her body from catching a cold than soak in cold water again. Then, hearing the man's movement, Jinwan turned to see that Mo Jingshin seemed to be going out. She subconsciously grabbed the edge of the bathtub and asked him, "Where are you going?" The man paused and did not turn back. "Didn't you say that you didn't want me to touch you? Soaking in the water is good for relieving tension. I can't stand here and watch you wriggle like a snake in the water. Otherwise, I'm afraid I can't be a saint." Jinwan, his words seemed to make sense, but strangely, she felt wronged. Jinwan felt that this medicine was definitely not something good. It could even control her IQ. Seeing that the man was really going to leave, she grabbed a towel by the side and threw it harshly at the man's back. Mo Jingshin let her vent, speaking softly in the still pitter-patter of the bathtub. "Be good and soak in the water for a night. You know the bathtub has an automatic water temperature adjustment function. Remember to adjust the temperature yourself." And Jinwan watched his back with red eyes. "Mo Jingshin, I feel so uncomfortable right now. I'm about to explode." He then turned his head to look at her indifferently. "I know. So what do you want? To go to the hospital?" Of course, she wouldn't go to the hospital. She had probably heard part of the call he had made to Chin's sighting. Putting aside the fact that it would be embarrassing to go to the hospital with this kind of medicine, it would be useless even if she went. The doctor would only give her a tranquilizer. "No," she said firmly. "Well, let's soak then." With that, the man was about to leave. Mo Jingshin. Jinwan's hand was still gripping the bathtub tightly. He had already opened the bathroom door. Without turning his head, he said, "Occasionally, I'll let you have a taste of the fire of desire. It's only fair that you can see but not eat." Fair? What did it have to do with her that he was usually burning with desire? It wasn't like she took the initiative to seduce him. How could this be considered fair? Jinwan stared incredulously at his figure as he walked out until she could no longer see him. However, to prevent her from making any mistakes inside, the bathroom door was not closed. She shouted hoarsely and angrily at the door. "Mo Jingshin, you are so shameless. How is this fair for me?" The feeling of being influenced by the drug is not something a normal person can bear. There was no response from outside. This time, Jinwan was really angry, but the increasingly turbulent feeling in her body left her with no strength to shout or be angry. However, just as she was quietly soaking in the water, she vaguely heard movement from the bedroom. The bathroom she was in was the private bathroom that Mo Jingshin used to use, but at this time, the sound of water also came from the spare bathroom in the bedroom. While she was being tortured here, Mo Jingshin was actually taking a bath. She must be crazy to think that when he first appeared in the hotel and took her away, she felt that he was almost surrounded by a godly halo. What a F***king halo. After hearing the sound of water in the bathroom for a while, Jinwan closed her eyes. The clothes on her body were too uncomfortable, and she raised her hand to take off the gown, but she did not have the strength to do so. After raising her hand for a long time, she could only tug down the other shoulder strap and then lay weakly in the bathtub. The warm water on her burning skin was so comfortable that she could not help but moan. However, she wanted to save her face, so she could only bite her lips and not make a sound. Not long after the sound of water in the bathroom stopped, Imo Jingshin came back wearing a set of soft gray home clothes. Jinwan finally opened her eyes. She stared blankly and hatefully at the man who was covered in the fragrance of shower gel. She then looked at his clean, short hair that did not need any styling and was already charming enough. She closed her eyes and turned her head away from him. She said reluctantly, "Can you help me take off my gown? It's stuck to my body with the water. It's too uncomfortable." The man did not refuse. He responded and came over, helped her up from the bathtub, and easily unzipped the back of her gown. Because the gown was unzipped, her body loosened, and then the gown was taken off by the man. Jinwan was wearing a set of nude underwear. Soaking in water like this, there was no difference between wearing it and not wearing it. She did not look at the man's seemingly calm but darkening gaze. She turned her head away and hugged her chest in the warm water with her hands. "You're wearing your underwear like this. Do you need me to help you take it off?" Imo Jingshin stood by her bathtub like a gentleman. His low, husky voice carried a hint of patience. However, based on Jinwan's understanding of him, this man was definitely not so kind. Otherwise, if he wanted to take it off, he would have done so earlier. Why didn't he ask her? He was just forcing her to take the initiative to ask him to help her. Jinwan clutched her underwear and remained stubborn. "No need. Then wear it." The man stood up and sat by the bathtub. He watched her in the water, her body flushed seductively because of the drug. Her cheeks were also red and delicate, but she gritted her teeth and endured it. "Didn't you say you didn't want to see me in the bathtub? Why are you sitting here and looking at me?" The man's hand gently stirred the water in her bathtub, and when the water splashed onto her shoulder, her entire body trembled. She lowered her head to look at the man's fingers on the water, and for some reason, she yearned for this hand to touch her body. Chapter 654. His words caused Jinwan's ears to heat up. Her shoulders and neck were covered in goosebumps from the water splashing over. She turned her face away to avoid him, but the man had already bent down. He patiently and gently placed his hand on the bite wound on her neck. She sat in the bathtub, unable to move because of his touch. She was afraid that if she moved, she would moan uncontrollably. Behind her was the edge of the bathtub, but in front of her was a pool of warm water. She couldn't tell if the force on her neck was light or painful, but at least when Imo Jingshin looked at the bite mark, he definitely wouldn't be in a good mood. "When he bit you, you should have knocked him unconscious. Did you have to be injured to learn to be decisive?" The man's voice was close to her ear, low and husky. Jinwan ignored him and placed one hand on her bent knee. However, because of his touch, she couldn't help but curl up her fingers. At that time, there was only one ashtray in the entire room, but it was very far away. If there had been one by my hand from the beginning, the moment I opened my eyes and saw him, I would have taken action. As though he had heard a very satisfactory answer, the man moved his hand away from her neck and turned to hold the back of her head, turning her to look at him. "Because of the drug, you lost control and had to run into the bathroom to take a cold shower. What were you thinking about?" Jinwan's heart instantly thumped hard. She wanted to shift her eyes away, but because of the man's hand on the back of her head, she couldn't. What was she thinking about? What else could she be thinking about? She had lived 2 lives, but he was the only man she had ever met. All the vivid images that popped up in her mind were of him pressing her down on the bed. When he finally appeared, she even suspected for a moment that she was hallucinating because of her desire. But what was there to be surprised about? At that time, if she had been thinking about another man, she would have been truly shocked. Besides, she was only thinking about it. Not only is your mouth stubborn, but your temper is also stubborn. Yet, I insist on shoving a hedgehog like you into my arms. Do you think I'm masochistic now? His tongue slowly moved from her cheek to the back of her ear and then to her neck. His voice was low and husky. "Even if you stab me every time I touch you, I still enjoy it. There are many ways to push you back into my arms. Even if it's just physical intimacy, at least when you're in trouble, your body is still honest. You know who you desire the most. How do you know that the person I was thinking of was you? There are millions of men in the world, and I've met many good men." The man chuckled in her ear, Because I am your first man, and also your last man, and because I have the ability to make you not interested in other men. In this matter, you can only accept my intimacy and only like me. Jinwan was angered by his confidence and choked. CEO Mo, your wishful thinking and your shamelessness are really getting better and better. He smiled lightly. I don't know about other things, but just now in the hotel bathroom, from the very beginning to the moment when you realized it was me who was holding you, the scene of you relaxing in an instant is very unforgettable. Mo Jingshin, I find that you're really shameless to the extreme. You're forcing me to fight with you, aren't you? In that situation, I was besieged on all sides. Compared with Shang Yihan, of course, you're safer. I was instinctively Before Jinwan could finish her words, the hidden button on the back of her underwear was suddenly undone by the man. It was fine if it was undone. She was currently enduring the effects of the drug, and her body was extremely sensitive. The tightly pressed underwear suddenly loosened, and warm water flowed over her sensitive spot. In an instant, her entire body trembled, and her gaze became even more dazed. Instinctively what? As he spoke, he took her out of the water with his long arm and let her sit on the edge of the bathtub. As soon as her pink body came out of the water and came into contact with the coolness of the air, she immediately trembled again. Before she could react, the man's kiss fell on her. At the moment, Jinwan couldn't help but soften in his arms. She was instantly pressed against the nearest wall by the bathtub. The kiss was so deep that she forgot what she had just said. She clearly remembered what she wanted to say, but she almost melted into a puddle of water. Because Jinwan's body was still wet, the man's home clothes were soaked because of this movement. The bathroom was steaming, and the soaked clothes clearly outlined the man's figure. But in the steamy space, there was only the temperature of each other and the entanglement of their breaths close to each other. Jinwan could no longer sit steadily. Her back was against the wall, and she could only hold on to the man's clothes with both hands to prevent herself from falling to the side. All her reason had collapsed because of this kiss. However, just as she almost lost control and raised her hands to hold the man's shoulders tightly, she took the initiative to kiss him back and even burrowed into his arms. The man suddenly stopped the kiss and then stepped back from her. Jinwan's hand was holding on to the cloth on his shoulder, but because of his movement, her hand fell weakly to the side of her legs. Her reason, which was immersed in some kind of desire, burned her nerves. She opened her eyes, and her eyelashes were wet. She looked in confusion at the man who had just changed into his home clothes and was almost half soaked. You, what are you doing? He suddenly came to kiss her, evoking the strong desire she had suppressed with great difficulty, and then he let her go. Was it so interesting to watch her suffer? However, the man casually took down a towel and covered her head with it. As Jinwan furrowed her brows and stared at him with red, longing eyes, he used the towel to dry her wet hair and then wiped the water off her body. Even as Jinwan grew impatient from his actions, he remained exceptionally patient. She felt as if there were countless cat claws scratching at her flesh, especially when the towel was wiping her body. Every inch of her body was separated by the towel, and she could not feel the warmth of the man's palm. That desire and unwillingness almost tortured her to the point of insanity. Jinwan could not take it anymore. She raised her arms and circled them around the man's neck. She raised her head to bite him, urgently and hoarsely saying, "Stop wiping." The man chuckled softly and huskily. "I've already taken a cold shower. Now I have to wipe myself clean so that I won't catch a cold." Chapter 655. Don't torture me anymore. If you want to do it, then do it. Emote Jingshun. Hurry up. Jinwan's voice was already tearing up. I can't take it anymore. He lowered his head to kiss the corner of her lips, saying calmly, "It's been more than 3 hours since you were drugged. If you calm down for a while, the effects of the drug will wear off. Endure it a little longer." And Jinwan's hand gripped the clothes on his back tightly. "I can't. Then do you want me? Or do you want me to go downstairs to the toy store to buy it for you?" Jinwan directly wrapped her arms around his neck with force, raising her head to kiss him. Even her body was pressed tightly against his, presenting herself to him without the slightest gap. Even if she had gone crazy, she really couldn't control herself anymore. Mo Jingshan's eyes darkened to the extreme because of her actions. He casually tossed aside the towel he had placed on her to wipe her body, and his free hand directly lifted her up. He lowered his head and directly took the initiative to deepen the kiss. In the bathroom, they kissed until the sky darkened. Then, Jean Wan was carried by him. She heard the man kick open the bathroom door and carry her into the bedroom while kissing her all the way. Mo Jingshan easily tore away the last barrier on her lower body. Then Jean Wan's back was empty, and she fell directly onto the bed. Then the man fell down with her in his arms, and the two of them fell into the center of the bed at the same time. The little woman whose body was burning hot could no longer hold it in. One of her hands was pressed against the bed, and the other was actively tearing at the man's body. The buttons on the man's home clothes were not tight, and they were even very loose under her hands. In just a few moments, she had undone several buttons. Jean Wan closed her eyes. She could not tell whether it was her own voice or the man's panting. However, as the kiss deepened, she unconsciously bent her legs. The man kissed along her chin to her neck, and inch by inch, her collarbone and the surrounding skin. The desire that was about to reach the top of her head made Jean Wan's entire body tremble uncontrollably under him. Her mouth made various sounds that she had never dared to make in her life. She was a little afraid of herself like this. Mo Jingshan, do men like women like this in bed? Jean Wan covered her eyes with her hand, speaking hoarsely as though she had been wronged. The man chuckled and kissed her lips again. He smiled hoarsely and said, "I've seen what you look like. Do you really think you're calmer than you are now when you're not drugged and you're begging me to let you go?" Jean Wan, really? Jean Wan instantly abandoned her image and followed her heart's desire to be entangled with the man. When Jean Wan's behavior became more and more out of control, Mo Jingshan smiled heavily, pecked her lips, and asked hoarsely, "So soon?" Of course, Jean Wan was very anxious. It would be strange if she wasn't anxious at this time. The man clearly kept igniting her body, but he still refused to satisfy her. She moved back and forth, twisted, and then stared at him as if she wanted his life. She grabbed his arm tightly and said, "Hurry up. You asked for it." The dinner party was held when the sky gradually darkened. Jean Wan had no idea which glass of wine she had drunk was problematic. However, from the time she drank those glasses of wine to the time she woke up in Sheng Yihan's room, and now it had been several hours. She had no idea how she had endured it. At least, when she was carried back to AO Lawn International, it was already past midnight. The early morning sun shone in through the windows of AO Lawn International, passing through the tiny gaps between the curtains. Outside the curtains was the most beautiful scenery of High City. The morning fog had not yet risen, and the warm sunlight passed through the fog and landed on the plain curtains. From late at night to early morning, the intermittent sounds in the master bedroom did not stop. The woman's panting and crying sounded as though she could no longer bear it, but it was so charming that he could not stop. To the man, it was even more stimulating than the drugged wine she had mistakenly drunk. The lights in the room were not turned on, and the only light came from the window. Mo Jingshan carried Jean Wan to the bathroom and showered her. He wrapped her in a bathrobe and sent her back to the bed. However, in the midst of her drowsiness, the woman grabbed his arm again and climbed onto his body without any hesitation. This repeated until noon. The two of them almost gave up on taking a shower. In the end, Jean Wan completely endured the effects of the drug. Her body was exhausted to the point of dispersing, and she fell into a deep sleep on the bed. In the evening, the sunset glow passed through the curtains. Jean Wan finally opened her eyes, but she had no strength at all. Every part of her body was sore to the point where she suspected that her body parts needed to be reassembled. Otherwise, she would most likely be crippled. Most importantly, Mo Jingshan, who rarely lazed in bed, was still by her side. What time was it now? If she remembered correctly, yesterday's dinner party was on the weekend, and today was Monday. She was just about to get up when the man sat up first. However, the moment she sat up, she fell back. Mo Jingshun reached out to catch her, lowering his head to place her back on the pillow. After tossing and turning for so long, "Are you sure you can get off the bed now?" As he spoke, the man bent down to pick up the bathrobe on the ground. When the man got off the bed and tied the belt around the bathrobe, Jinwon picked up the pillow he had just slept on and threw it at him. Her voice was hoarse as she said, "If I hadn't seen Sheng Yihan yesterday, I would have suspected that you were the one who drugged me. From what I see, it's clear that you're the one who's unsatisfied and resorted to despicable methods to abduct me." Jinwon said this deliberately. No matter how one looked at it, it sounded like she was venting her anger after calming down. However, it also sounded like she was acting coquettishly. Right now, her legs were so weak that she could barely get off the bed. However, the man was calm and composed as though he had only done a simple aerobic exercise. The disparity between their stamina was truly heart-wrenching. He glanced at her. "Who was the one who refused to let go after every round last night? Weren't you the one who kept burrowing into my embrace?" Jinwon, she was speechless. Even if she was drugged, it wasn't because she drank too much. She clearly remembered everything that happened last night. Even if it was just a single moment, she could remember it clearly. Chapter 656. Jinwon sat up with some difficulty. She grabbed the pillow under her and threw it at him. "It's one thing to cling on to you. You also know that I was irrational back then. But can't you be gentler?" Mo Jingshan bent down. He was right in front of her eyes. The man's voice also became gentler and deeper because of this action. "You used that lustful expression to burrow into my embrace, rubbing your legs against my body, and you still expect me to be gentler? Then you clearly know that I've been exhausted for a long time. You just have to give me a perfunctory answer. Is there a need for you to do it with your own body?" Jinwon raised her face and glared at him. "You know what I mean." Mo Jingshin unhurriedly stated, "How did I do that? Just hug and coax me a little. Coax me to sleep. I'd probably be able to rest by now. You flirted around in my embrace until I was on fire. You want me to hug you to sleep? I can't do it." Jinwon jumped up from the bed. In the end, the soreness between her legs tugged at her nerves. Her expression twisted, and she fell back onto the bed. The man chuckled softly. "You don't remember how you spent last night? I really should get someone to study the drug that Ji Mingran drugged you with. There were several times when I felt sorry for you and slowed down. Because of that, you bit me unforgivingly. I wanted to let you go, but I can see that your ability to cling on to others is very impressive. Time and time again, after I've showered and decided to give up, you bring me back to bed. In this world, I'm afraid only a woman like you can do this." Jinwon, she had already regained her rationality. She grabbed the blanket and wrapped it around her body, changing the topic. "Last night, that person, that Sheng Yihan, will he die? You wish for him to live." Jinwon's expression turned colder. "Indeed, he deserves to die, but I don't want to kill anyone. Back then, I had no choice but to smash him with the ashtray. Furthermore, he drank the drugged alcohol yesterday. If I don't knock him down, I'm afraid the situation will really go out of control." Mo Jingshun watched her. "Regardless of whether I'm dead or alive, it won't land on your head." Jinwon raised her head to look at him. "You used to be indifferent to the Sheng group and didn't care much about it. But now, what are you going to do?" He smiled faintly. "Today is Monday. I've spent the entire weekly meeting with the company's executives to sleep with you. Are you sure that the first thing you want to do after waking up is to discuss the man who bit your neck yesterday?" Jinwon felt that his smile was a little scary and immediately stopped mentioning Sheng Yihan's name. However, she suddenly realized that it was already Monday evening. Not only was Mo Jingshin absent from the company's senior management meeting on Mondays, but she was also absent from the company's senior management meeting on Monday. Her MN group also had a routine senior management meeting on Monday, and she was also absent. Jinwon subconsciously rushed to look for her phone, only to recall that at the banquet yesterday, when she was taken away, her small bag seemed to have fallen onto the ground. "My bag and phone. Shamu has already gone to deal with it last night." If he can find it in the banquet hall, he'll send it over to you tonight. Jinwan relaxed but suddenly thought of something. She abruptly blurted out, Mo Jingshin, did you not take any precautions last night? Mo Jingshin immediately coldly glanced at her. Mrs. Mo, what precautions do you want to take? Please take back the words, Mrs. Mo. No matter how busy the company is, I'll definitely go to the Civil Affairs Bureau tomorrow to check, lest you take advantage of me verbally. Sure, as long as you want to check, I can accompany you anytime. The man leaned closer to her. As your husband, I've missed out on what I've missed out on, and what I've missed out on because I changed the course of your life. Even though it's been so long, in the eyes of the law, your name as Mrs. Mo has never changed. Not only should I enjoy the rights of your husband and fulfill the duties of a husband, but Mrs. Mo should also give me the identity of a child's father. Besides, I was tightly pestered by you last night. How could I possibly have the time to take precautions? As he spoke, his breath brushed against her skin, disturbing Jinwan's thoughts. Jinwan unnaturally turned her face away slightly. Your phone has been ringing in the living room for a long time. Aren't you going to pick it up? Shine Group's CEO suddenly disappeared for an entire day on Monday. There are bound to be a lot of things he needs to call you to deal with. Also, have Shamu bring my bag back as soon as possible. I'm sure I'll have a lot of calls. After saying that, she covered her head with the quilt and laid her head back on the pillow. Have a good rest. After you wake up, take a bath to relax. I'll call someone to send dinner over before the sky turns dark. The man finished speaking and turned to leave the bedroom. Jinwan tugged the blanket off her head. She watched his back and recalled how she had been pestering him earlier. She felt flustered. However, looking at him now, she felt that from the moment she asked him if he had taken precautions, his entire being had turned cold. It was as though he was angry. Although her miscarriage in the United States 3 years ago was not a shadow in her heart, she had experienced so many things at that time. In addition, Su Shui had directly pushed her out of the car on the highway. In that situation, the child could not be saved. Mo Jingshin had also almost risked his life to save her. But now she was still uncertain about the situation of their marriage and feelings. In this situation, if she hadn't been drugged, she wouldn't have considered taking precautions. She just asked him why was he angry. Jinwan turned over and covered her head with the blanket again. However, in the darkness of the blanket, she covered her forehead with her hand. Her mind kept replaying the intense and continuous entanglement on this bed, and her ears gradually turned hot. In the living room, it was Shun Mu who called. CEO Mo, Shung Yihan's life has been saved, but he hasn't woken up. That ashtray is very heavy. At that time, Miss G must have used a lot of strength to smash it in order to protect herself, but no one's life fell into her hands. At least, I can guarantee that her mood will not be affected. Shin Mu said calmly. As for what happened last night, we found enough evidence to catch the Shung Group and Jimingran Studio in one fell swoop. Mo Jingshun said indifferently, let's go through the legal process. Although we're going through the legal process, after all, it's all done in secret. The degree of violation that can be found on the surface is still too light. We can only put them in prison for a few years, but not enough to deprive them of their rights for life. Chapter 657. Jinwan stayed under the quilt and refused to go out. Even when it was time for dinner, and Mo Jingshin came to ask her to eat, she just responded lazily and continued to sleep. When Mo Jingshin came over and was about to take her out of the quilt, she hurriedly wrapped herself in the quilt and rolled on the bed twice, saying that she would go down to eat right away. After dinner, she fell back onto the bed. She had to rely on sufficient rest and sleep to make up for the energy she had expended earlier. As for Mo Jingshin, she really doubted whether he was even human. He was the one who kept moving on the bed. She, who was under him, was so tired, yet he was completely fine. She really suspected that if she had more drugs and kept pestering him without a care for her life, would this man still be able to continue and completely squeeze out her last breath? At around 7 o'clock in the evening, Shinmu brought over the things Jinwan dropped in the banquet hall. He said that the hotel's cleaner had picked them up and handed them over to the hotel security office. There was nothing missing in the bag. There was a password on her phone, so of course, it could not be easily opened. Jinwan checked and thanked Shinmu. Shinmu smiled, but did not dare to glance at Jinwan. After all, Jinwan did not have her own clothes to wear in AO Lan International. Right now, she was wearing Mo Jingshin's shirt. Although she was also wearing a pair of pants that had been rolled up countless times, the collar of the shirt was not high. The ambiguous marks on her neck were not covered. With one glance, he could tell what kind of intense battle had happened here yesterday. Yesterday, when Jinwan was carried out of the hotel by Mo Jingshin, he knew what had happened to her. However, it was up to them how they wanted to settle it. After all, he was an outsider, and it was not easy for him to guess. However, the visual impact of seeing it with his own eyes caused Shinmu to quickly look away. He did not dare to look at Jinwan. In fact, Jinwan had tried her best to shrink her neck, but no matter how hard she tried, the marks on her neck could not disappear. Furthermore, she did not find anything to cover them with. Of course, she knew the reason why Shinmu did not dare to look at her. It was fine if he did not look at her. If he did, she would only feel awkward. Cough. And this was indeed not Mo Jingshin's fault. It was she who pestered Mo Jingshin again and again. By the way, Miss G. Before Shinmu left, he said, Ji Mingran's whereabouts have been located. She's hiding in the Ji family's villa and won't come out. Tomorrow morning, the police will probably come to arrest her. Do you have anything else to say? Or is there anything else you want to do about Ji Mingran? There's nothing to explain. People who do wrong deserve to be punished. If I don't intervene, the police won't let her escape easily, right? Shinmu smiled. It could be heard that Jinwan had guessed that CEO Mo would not allow Ji Mingran to get away scot-free. This time, she had completely plucked the feathers off the tiger's head. Now that she had fallen into the tiger's mouth, she no longer had any excuse to escape. Indeed, even if Jinwan didn't do anything, Ji Mingran would spend the rest of her life in prison. After a few years, it would be too easy for her to commit suicide due to mental problems. Of course, the Shung's group, one of the 4 largest families in High City that was about to be destroyed, would also accompany her. On Monday night, Mo Jingshin didn't go to the company during the day. At night, he had some electronic documents to deal with, so he went straight to the study. Jinwan had told him that she wouldn't stay with him during dinner, but the man had no intention of asking someone to send her a set of clothes. She wanted to call him, but in fact, she felt tired even to raise her hand. If she went back to Yuehu Bay like this, she probably wouldn't be able to get up tomorrow. Anyway, he had work tonight and wouldn't be too much of an eyesore in front of her. Jinwan curled up on the sofa and watched the news on her cell phone. When the man came out of the study, he saw Jinwan leaning against the sofa with her cell phone by her hand and almost falling asleep. The little woman's head was tilted and the screen of her cell phone had been dark for a long time. He looked at her for a moment and strode toward her. When he was about to carry her back to the bedroom, Jinwan suddenly opened her eyes when she heard his movement. She looked up at him as if she had just dreamed of something and suddenly thought of something. Her eyes were a little drowsy, but she suddenly asked, "The headquarters of Shine Group is in Los Angeles. You haven't returned to the United States for so long. Are you going to stay in High City in the future?" She remembered that he hadn't returned to High City for 10 years and had lived in the United States for 10 whole years. As soon as she finished speaking, the man put his cell phone aside so that it wouldn't touch her and was about to pick her up. Jinwan hurriedly raised her hand to push his hand away. "I don't need you to carry me. I'm not disabled." Mo Jingshin chuckled. "Aren't your legs too weak to move?" Jinwan slapped his hand away. "Anyway, I can do it myself. Don't always find excuses to carry me." The man who had been seen through chuckled. In the end, he did not continue to hug her, lest she continued to explode. "Have you finished your work?" Jinwan glanced at the study and then at the time on her cell phone. "I still have some documents." "No hurry. I'll read them after I take a shower." With that, the man took another look at her. Seeing that she seemed to be very comfortable curled up on the sofa, he didn't ask her to go back to the bedroom. He picked up the cell phone on the coffee table and glanced at it again, then put it down and turned to enter the bathroom. The reason why he glanced at the cell phone was that a message had just come in. It seemed to be a string of English words, but Jean-Wan didn't see it clearly. Seeing the man enter the bathroom, Jean-Wan leaned against the sofa, glanced at the cell phone on the coffee table, and got up to pick it up. The cell phone had a password and couldn't be unlocked. Just as Jean-Wan was about to try using the phone password he used 3 years ago, suddenly, a new message popped up on the screen. It was still in English, but this new message could be seen on the lock screen. It was sent by his secretary in the United States. The English translation was, CEO MO, have you confirmed the date of your return to Los Angeles? Jean-Wan's eyes paused. Back to Los Angeles? Mo Jingshin came out of the shower and saw that Jean-Wan was still sitting on the sofa. When he walked over, he saw that his cell phone was also in her hand. He took it and saw the message from his secretary and guessed that she must have seen it. What? You don't want me to leave? Jean-Wan turned her eyes to the man who was looking down at her. With Shine, the United States is where you belong. Why are you staying in High City for so long? Chapter 658. Jean-Wan, I'm not asking about that. I'm saying that when you're in High City, just for you. There's no other reason. Jean-Wan pursed her lips. In truth, she did not know what she wanted to ask. She probably only wanted to know if he would spend most of his time in America or would he stay in High City. However, when the words reached her lips, she suddenly did not know how to ask. She did not seem to have a need to ask about such things. The scales in her heart had already begun to lose balance bit by bit. She lowered her head to pick up her phone, no longer looking at him. She casually said, You can't be saying that I'm more important than Shine. You're indeed more important than Shine. She had only casually mentioned it, but the man's reply was straightforward. This time, Jean-Wan was completely speechless. She raised her eyes to look at him. After thinking for a moment, she abruptly stood up and turned to leave. As she walked, she said, Go do what you need to do. I'm going back to the bedroom to sleep. Mo Jingshan watched as Jean-Wan headed back to the bedroom without looking back. He smiled mildly. Sweet dreams, Mrs. Mo Jean-Wan. Her footsteps quickened as she entered the bedroom. The little woman returned to the bedroom. Mo Jingshan picked up his phone again. Before the phone rang, he saw the caller ID displayed on the screen. He picked up the call and asked in an indifferent and businesslike tone, What's the matter? The next morning, Jean-Wan received a call from the G family. It was from Annie Chin. Eldest miss, hurry back. Right now, the G family is about to be flipped upside down because of second Mississippi Director G's heart is aching from anger. Before the sun rose, the police car had already arrived at the G family. They said that they were going to take second miss away. Second Miss has been kneeling and begging Director G to save her, but it's clear that Director G is about to have a relapse from anger. Jean-Wan directly rushed back to the G family. The moment she arrived at the courtyard of the G family's villa, she saw a police car parked outside. The police officer in charge of the area sat in the car. They had received orders from their superiors to detain Ji Min-gran and take her away. However, the nearby police station had some relations with the G family. Thus, even if they had to take Ji Min-gran away, they still gave Ji Hongwon face and gave the father and daughter some time to say their goodbyes. In the end, he didn't expect that Ji Min-gran would use this time to kneel down and beg for mercy. Jean-Wan walked in. Outside the villa, she could hear the sound of crying even through the door. She narrowed her eyes and recalled the scene when she woke up in Shang Yihan's room. Her face turned cold bit by bit, and she raised her hand to push the door open. Seeing that Jean-Wan had returned, Auntie Chin rushed forward to welcome her. Eldest Miss. Jean-Wan placed her hand on Auntie Chin's outstretched hand and gently patted it comfortingly. At the same time, she turned around to see Ji Hongwon sitting on the sofa in the living room with an ugly expression on his face. She also saw Ji Min-gran kneeling in front of him, crying until her nose was red. Dad, you can't do this. I'm your biological daughter. You can't just watch me be taken away by the police. You know that if I'm taken away like this, they won't let me go easily. Dad, I'm begging you. blood is thicker than water. In this world, I'm the closest person to you, right? You have to help me. Please. Dad, I'm begging you. Jinwon watched this scene coldly. Ji Ming ran. Her voice was like a cold stream in the deep mountains, cold and bone-piercing. Although we don't have the same father, we are at least of the same mother. It said that blood is thicker than water, but what have you done to me? You were the one who walked step by step to this stage, and you still want to rely on kinship to save yourself? I'm afraid you're indulging in fantasy. When Ji Ming Gran heard Jinwon's voice, she abruptly turned around. When she saw that Jinwon had actually returned, her expression instantly changed. A hint of panic appeared in her eyes, and she quickly stiffened her neck and shouted at her, "Scram! This is my Ji family's place. Your surname isn't even Ji. This isn't your home. Scram!" After speaking, Ji Ming Gran grabbed a cup of tea from the coffee table and was about to throw it at Jinwon. "Try throwing it at her if you dare." Ji Hongwen's voice was filled with suppressed anger. Ji Mingran's hand stiffened, but the cup had already left her hand and was thrown toward Jinwon. "Eldest miss." Annie Chin was startled. However, Jinwon only tilted her head slightly. The cup flew over her shoulder and landed heavily on the ground, producing a loud, shattering sound. She calmly glanced at the shattered teacup behind her and then at Ji Ming Gran, who was kneeling in front of Ji Hongwen. It was clear that she had been crying for a long time. "You're so afraid to see me return? Why? Dad only knows that the reason you're being arrested by the police is because your studio has been sued for several commercial crimes, including the defamation that was reported to the media a few days ago. I also know that you colluded with the Sheng Corporation and tried to poach people from my MN group to steal business secrets for you. In the end, you were discovered. With all these commercial crimes added together, if you're convicted, you'll only be imprisoned for a few years. Isn't that right?" Hearing Jinwon's words, Ji Mingran's shoulders trembled. She abruptly raised her hand to grab onto Ji Hongwen's pants. Her voice trembled as she said, "Dad, let her go. Hurry and let her go. I'm your daughter. Don't listen to anything she says. As expected, you don't even dare to admit to the filthy things you've done." Jinwon coldly laughed. Ji Ming Gran tried to interrupt her. "Dad, hurry and make her scram. She's intentionally adding oil to the fire." Jinwon coldly spoke without a ripple of emotion. "Me leave? After you're brought away by the police, which mess you've created in our family doesn't need me to clean up? Since you're able to do such despicable things, you should admit it. Do you want Dad to be soft-hearted toward you? Is that why you don't dare to admit to drugging Sheng Yihan's and my wine? Shut up. You're spouting nonsense." She only managed to shout out half of her words when the arm that had just climbed onto Ji Hongwen's leg was abruptly pushed away. Ji Hongwen turned to look at Jinwon. "What drug? What Sheng Yihan? There's nothing like that." "Dad, don't listen to her nonsense." Ji Mingran's expression changed. She rushed to grab onto his leg again to stop him. Jinwon wore a British-style gown. Her long, straight, and soft hair fell cleanly over her shoulders and back, perfectly complementing her originally fair and delicate face. She stood there calmly watching Ji Mingran's crying appearance. Her gaze was clear and cold, carrying with it the steadiness of many years of experience. She would not be affected by the joy of finally getting her revenge. Instead, she was exceptionally calm. Chapter 659. What? You? Ji Hongwen was so angry that his face stiffened. His eyes froze, and he raised his hand to cover his heart. He stared in disbelief at Ji Ming Gran, who was still kneeling by his feet. Everyone in the Ji family knew how much Ji Hongwen hated Sheng Yihan. Many years ago, during the Spring Festival, Jinwon was alone at home and was almost raped by Sheng Yihan. This was a taboo in the Ji family, and no one dared to mention it. It was precisely because everyone knew that Ji Hongwen was extremely remorseful over this matter and was extremely sensitive and disgusted by it. He had been vexed for many years because of his momentary negligence that he almost caused Jinwon. Jinwon knew too well how powerful her words were, but she still said it. Some people really force themselves into a dead end. They had no one to blame. Dad, she's talking nonsense. Dad, she's talking nonsense. It's all nonsense. I've been at home for the past 2 days. I've been at home. I was also at home the night before yesterday. I didn't show up at all. I wasn't even at the scene, she said. How could she slander me like this? Dad, it's all fake. Don't believe what Jean Wan said. Dad, I beg you, Bang. Before Ji Min Gran could finish her words, Ji Hongwen abruptly kicked her to the carpet. Ji Min Gran seemed to feel no pain. She hurriedly climbed up and crawled to his leg. Dad, I didn't. How dare you treat Jean Wan in such a disgusting way? No matter what, you are still Qing Lin's children. You have the same mother. Is this how you treat your own sister? That brat, Sheng Yihan, conspired against Jean Wan, which was why I chased him out of the Ji family. Now that he harbors evil intentions against the Ji family, not only did you follow him, but you actually dared to send Jean Wan to his bed. Ji Hongwen was so angry that his voice was ragged. You made mistakes again and again, and every time they were unforgivable. But I can see that Jean Wan didn't do anything to you or force you into a dead end because of the Ji family's kindness in raising her. As long as you don't provoke her, your studio and your future can live peacefully, but you just had to provoke her. Dad, it's not like that. I didn't drug her. I didn't do it. Ji Mingran was still struggling. She sobbed and knelt by his leg, hugging it tightly. If I really drugged her, how could she return to the Ji family like this? Jean Wan coldly looked in Ji Mingran's direction. Don't you know why the police blocked the Ji family's door today? You sent me to Sheng Yihan's bed, drugged us, and even arranged several reporters outside the door, waiting for an opportunity to break in and take pictures of us in bed. Just to destroy me. You must have considered the price. After all, destroying me in this way will also implicate Imo Jingshan. He definitely won't let you off. You know you won't have a good ending, so you want to die with me. You want me to ruin my reputation with you and be photographed rolling in bed with Sheng Yihan in? But the only thing you miscalculated was that I had already knocked Sheng Yihan unconscious in the room. What's more, Imo Jingshan arrived and took me away in time. Otherwise, your meticulous and mutually destructive plan would really kill 2 birds with 1 stone. You're really amazing. Stop it. Ji Mingran cried shrilly. Jean Wan, I hate you. Shut up. Don't say any more. Ji Mingran's tears flowed down her face. Dad, it's not like that. This is a misunderstanding. Before she could finish her words, Ji Hongwen's leg flung her away. He gave her another kick, causing her to stumble backward. She looked extremely pathetic. Ji Hongwen's face was livid. He pointed at her and said harshly, You're really lawless and deranged. I originally thought you were just a piece of trash. I really didn't expect that you would actually do such an extreme and stupid thing. It's not like that, Dad. Shut up. I just want the police to take you away as soon as possible. I, Ji Hongwen, will never admit to having a daughter like you in this lifetime. Ji Hongwen stood up and did not look at her anymore. He frowned and turned to ask Jean Wan. Wan, Imo Jingshan arrived in time? Are you sure you're all right? It's fine. The only one who met with an accident was Sheng Yihan. In order to protect myself, I used an ashtray to knock him out. I heard that he's still unconscious in the hospital, Jean Wan said coldly. Ji Hongwen closed his eyes, as though he was suppressing some anger. He let out a long breath. They're both daughters that I raised. What does it matter if their surname is Ji or not? The one with the surname Ji is actually deranged to such an extent. Ji Mingran's sobs rang out once more. Her voice was hoarse as she cried. It's because you've been biased toward Jean Wan since you were young. That's why I hate her more and more. Isn't it because of you that things have come to this point? You still dare to say that I'm biased? You've mentioned this more than once since you were young. I've also reminded you time and time again that I've never been biased towards either of you sisters. Jean Wan has always given in to you. What more do you want? You dare to say that it's not because Jean Wan looks more like her mother that you're especially biased towards her? Do you dare to say it? Ji Mingran screamed hoarsely. Even if she looks very similar to Qing Lin, you're still my biological daughter. Is there a need for me to be biased? Ji Hong, when rebuked. Ji Min Gran sat on the ground in a sorry state. She immediately laughed coldly. That's right. You've also admitted that she looks very similar to my mother. If it wasn't because of this, how could you possibly be willing to raise an outsider's child? I really wonder which garbage dump my mother gave birth to her from. She doesn't even know who her biological father is. What's there to be arrogant about? Our G family provides for her food and clothing. If not for you and the G family, she would have long starved to death. Such a piece of trash, what right does she have to fight with me and the G family? What right does she have? All of a sudden, a cold and stern voice rang from outside the door. Even without the G family, as long as her mother brought her back to the Xiao family, she would still be the apple of the Xiao family's eye. How could she allow you to insult her? Ji Mingran's voice choked. She abruptly raised her eyes to see that the door to the Ji family's villa had been kicked open. A man in his 50s walked in. If she remembered correctly, this was the chairman of Ling Xiao Group, Xiao Jinjuan. When Jinwan heard these words, her back stiffened. She turned around and saw that Mr. Xiao had actually entered the Ji family's door. The moment he saw Xiao Zhenjuan, Ji Hongwen's complexion, which was already ashen from anger, turned even paler. He coldly stared at the man who was about his age. Dash. Chapter 660. Why did you come to the Ji family? Who allowed you to enter the Ji family? Ji Hongwen coldly said. Scram. Jinwan did not expect such a scene. The moment she saw Mr. Xiao, she heard Ji Hongwen's words. She abruptly turned to look at Ji Hongwen. Dad, since you've already guessed your relationship with the Xiao family, why do you keep avoiding me? Even when something happened, you refuse to ask for my help. Right now, the Ji family is in such a mess. His daughter keeps framing you. Why are you still standing here? When Mr. Xiao heard her call Ji Hongwen Dad, his expression darkened. Wan, I know about all of this. Come back to the Xiao family with me. In the future, Ji Mingran's dirty water will never be able to touch you again. Hearing these words, Ji Mingran stared at Jinwan in disbelief. What Xiao family? Jinwan did not speak. Her gaze remained fixed on the ashen-faced Ji Hongwen. She did not look at Mr. Xiao any longer. Elder Xiao coldly watched Ji Mingran, who was sitting on the ground in a sorry state. It's very simple. Earlier on, the rubbish heap you mentioned is the Xiao family. Jinwan's biological father is me. Even without the Ji family, she wouldn't have suffered from hunger and cold as you wished. If only Qing Lin's temper had softened and told me about her pregnancy, everything would not have turned out this way. Furthermore, you would never have existed in this world because she would never have married Ji Hongwen. Ji Hongwen abruptly raised his hand to cover his heart. He swayed slightly. Jinwan was startled and rushed forward to support him. Dad! Ji Mingran did not notice Ji Hongwen's expression at all. When she heard that Jinwan was actually the daughter of Ling Xiao Group's chairman, it was as though she had been struck by lightning. No, impossible, impossible. How could she be your daughter? She's just an illegitimate daughter with no status. I know that my mother was raped. She's the daughter of a rapist. She can't be your daughter. Mr. Zhao's expression instantly turned ugly. He coldly glanced at Ji Mingran before turning to look at Jinwan, who remained standing by Ji Hongwen's side. Rapist? Is that how you describe me? Old Master Xiao frowned coldly. Ji Hongwen, I haven't settled the score with you for stealing my wife and daughter behind my back, and you've already instilled such thoughts into the children, isn't it? Ji Hongwen pushed Jinwan's hand away and took a deep breath with some difficulty. You went back on your word and left her in America. You came back to marry the fiancé your family had decided on. When you remembered her, your son had already been born. She waited for you in America for several years. What did she get in the end? Ji Hongwen laughed coldly. You can say that you were forced or that your family was pressuring you, but you were still married and had a wife and a child. Yet when she found out the truth and wanted to cut all ties with you, you locked her up, took her, tortured her, and locked her up in the basement of the villa for 3 whole months. In the end, she was pregnant with your child and escaped. If I hadn't taken her away, I'm afraid she would have been tortured to death before the child was born. You didn't just rape her, you even abused her. Jinwan instantly raised her head to look at Old Master Xiao in disbelief. When Old Master Xiao received Jinwan's astonished gaze, his expression stiffened. He frowned and said, "At that time, Qinglin couldn't return to her home. She had nowhere to go. I was afraid that she would be in a bad mood and leave on her own. So I let her live in the villa, but never lock her up in the basement. I admit that I forced her to stay. But if I had known that she was pregnant, I would have taken good care of the mother and daughter. I would have divorced her and married her, keeping her in the Xiao family openly. Even if you didn't lock her in the basement, didn't you still hide her in a place that your family didn't know about? She had no intention of interfering in your marriage, but you forced her to be the one who couldn't see the light of day. You destroyed the relationship you had with your own hands in America. No matter how strong your love was, it couldn't compare to the hurt you caused her. She didn't even know whether she loved you or hated you. If she didn't love you, she wouldn't have given birth to Jinwan. But if she didn't hate you, she wouldn't have married me with a child. If she didn't love you, she wouldn't have died holding the necklace you gave her in America. But if she didn't hate me, she wouldn't have refused to inform you of her death." Ji Hongwen coldly looked at him. "The one surnamed Xiao, back when we were studying in America, we competed fairly. In the end, I lost to you wholeheartedly. I withdrew because I believed that you could give Qing Lin a good future. But what was the result? In the end, you ruined her life." When Old Master Xiao heard that Jinwan's mother refused to inform him of her death, his eyes darkened. Jinwan saw the eyes of this man in his 50s, who was said to be like a god in Ling Xiao group, gradually turning red. She didn't know what kind of love he had for her mother. She didn't know what kind of romance they had in America. But in the end, after he got married and had a son, he turned his love into tyrannical possessiveness and ruined her mother's life because of his selfishness and his refusal to let her go. No wonder Mo Jingshen said that if she met Old Master Xiao, she might not be happy. It turned out that when she learned what happened to her birth, she was indeed not very happy. Having a powerful father was not enough to satisfy her, because this father was too powerful, so he had the ability to lock up her mother 20 years ago and even dared to do whatever he wanted to her mother. Her mother finally flew out of that remote place with her own ability, but in the end, her wings were broken by Xiao Zhenjuan. Chapter 661. The Only Thing You Did Wrong? Listen, it was so difficult for you to shoulder the blame, yet you still act so righteously. Ji Hongwen coldly laughed. As expected, even at such an old age, you still want to protect your damn face. In front of your child, you can't even put down your pride to admit your mistake. Qing Lin's life has already been ruined by you. She has already left for so many years. Don't you feel the slightest bit of guilt in your heart? To this day, do you still think that it was her fault that she left while pregnant? Xiao Zhenjuan closed his eyes and was silent for a long time before saying, "She has already left for so many years. Regardless of whether it was my fault or not, what I want to do now is to make it up to my daughter. If Qing Lin still holds a grudge against me for what I did back then, when we meet in the netherworld 100 years later, I will apologize to her. But this is not a reason for you, Ji Hongwen, to hide my daughter for so many years. You even gave your own daughter so many chances to frame her." Ji Mingran, who had been sitting on the carpet for a long time, seemed to be the forgotten one. Suddenly being mentioned, she stiffened and looked at Ji Hongwen with reddened eyes. "Dad, I didn't—" Ji Hongwen closed his eyes. "I admit to this point. It was my fault for not raising my daughter properly. That's why Ming Gran could even do such a despicable thing." Ji Mingran cried out, "Dad, even at a time like this, you're still speaking up for an outsider. Others are already planning to take Ji Nwan away. In the future, Ji Nwan will no longer be your daughter. If even I am taken away by the police, do you want to spend the rest of your life alone?" Ji Hongwen closed his eyes. "Spending the rest of my life alone is much better than having a heartless and unscrupulous person by my side who framed her own sister for the sake of the family fortune." "Hey!" Ji Mingran suddenly laughed with reddened eyes. If Jin Wan is really the Shao family's daughter, do you think she would still be interested in the G Corporation's things? Jin Wan's hand on Ji Hongwen's arm did not leave. She coldly said, "Don't use your brainless mind to guess at me. Dad is currently in his 50s. If it weren't for you causing him to act up, he would still be in the prime of his life. At the very least, the G Corporation would still be in his hands for another 30 to 40 years. Why are you in such a hurry to get the family fortune? Do you really want Dad to step down as soon as possible?" In Xiao Jinjuan's hands, Ling's Xiao group was like the sun at high noon. Since they were classmates when they were studying in America, they were the same age. For a moment, Jin Wan felt indignant. Why did Xiao Jinjuan's body appear to be as healthy as a young man's, while Ji Hongwen was inferior to him? She had to arrange for 2 top-notch medical staff to be by Ji Hongwen's side to watch him exercise every day. She wouldn't stop until he was exceptionally healthy and strong within 2 years. Ji Mingran yelled, "I didn't say now because the last time I went back to the Ji family, Dad kept saying that he wouldn't leave a single cent to me in the future. I never said that I would make him give up his position now. Jin Wan, you're an outsider in the Ji family. Stop trying to sow discord here." Xiao Jinjuan coldly narrowed his eyes at the reckless Ji Mingran before turning to look at Jin Wan. "Outsider? Wan, come back with me. As long as the Xiao family is here, you'll never be an outsider." Jin Wan didn't hesitate at all. She helped Ji Hongwen back to the sofa and sat down. At the same time, she stood up from the sofa. Without looking back at Xiao Jinjuan, she said coldly, "Mr. Xiao must have come to the Ji family because you heard about what happened to me recently and rushed over to do something for me. I'm very grateful for Mr. Zhao's willingness to help me, but I'm sorry, I'm not related to the Xiao family at all. I have other ways to solve my problem. There's no need for you to trouble yourself. Besides, Mr. Xiao, you should be able to tell that the Ji family doesn't welcome you. You may leave." Hearing Jin Wan's words, Ji Hongwen suddenly looked up at her. Xiao Jinjuan wasn't surprised, but he obviously didn't expect that Ji Hongwen's biological daughter would still cling to the Ji family, even though she was so against her. Xiao Jinjuan said seriously, "In fact, you've already guessed it. Since I met you twice with your sharp wit, you must have guessed the relationship between you and the Xiao family many times, but you always avoided it. I can respect your choice. After all, we haven't seen each other for more than 20 years, and you don't have any father-daughter relationship with me. I understand that, but now the Ji family is like an abyss. You won't get any benefits even if you stay. You better come back with me. After all, we're related by blood, and the relationship between father and daughter can be cultivated slowly. Believe me, as long as the Xiao family is here, no one dares to stand on your head and make trouble. As long as I'm alive, I'll definitely spoil you like a princess. You'll be the apple of my Xiao family's eye. There's no such thing as an abyss. I grew up here, and this is my home. The person sitting on the sofa is my father," Jin Wan said flatly. "If Mr. Xiao had been standing outside for a long time, you should have heard Ji Mengran's complaint just now. She accused my father of favoring me since I was a child, so I've never been wronged here. As for the princess, I'm already in my 20s. How can I dream of being a princess? The Ji family used to be one of the 4 big families in High City, and I don't think it's any worse than the Xiao family. Mr. Xiao, you don't have to be so arrogant and condescending. Every inch under my feet carries my childhood memories and the warm and happy memories of my mother in the last few years of her life. This is my route." Xiao Jinjuan looked at her and slowly frowned. Wan. Jin Wan finally turned to look at him. "Please call me Miss Ji. My relationship with Mr. Xiao isn't close enough for you to address me like this." Xiao Jinjuan's hand, which was about to reach out to her, froze in midair. After a long while, he slowly lowered his hand. He turned back to look at the door behind him and changed the topic. "The police have been waiting outside for a long time. Ji Hongwen, are you still not going to throw your daughter out for committing a crime?" Ji Mingran rushed to crawl to Ji Hongwen's leg. Dad, please." Before her hand could touch Ji Hongwen's leg, Xiao Jinjuan's expression turned cold. 2 bodyguards suddenly entered the door. They stepped forward and lifted Ji Ming ran up without any hesitation. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.